Chapter 826. Final Battle? Are they crazy? In the extreme darkness of the southern heaven region, Lei Tian and Shueiyue, the two immortals, widened their eyes and incredulously looked at the 9 regions army that had gathered outside the domain of destruction. Under the dazzling and exaggerated golden light of Golden King, the true appearance of the decisive battle army of 9 regions was shown. The scale of this army was unprecedented. In the center, Golden King and the Western Continent Army, the Death to Immortal Sword Array personally presided over by Supreme Hichu, the Reborn Red Guards, and the Zaku Army led by the Nine-Tailed Fox. On the battlefield alone, this was a powerful force that even the immortals felt a faint fear. Not to mention that behind this army was the indomitable Great Array of the 9 regions. With Tetragon and the remaining Dixian as the core, all the cultivators in the world participated in it, converging into an invincible surging force. In a head-on confrontation, even someone as strong as an immortal venerable would die on the spot. However, seeing this scene, after a moment of wavering, Lei Tian and Shueiyue felt a heartfelt ecstasy. Quickly go and report to Senior Immortal that the people of 9 regions are finally willing to die. No matter how the people of 9 regions put together their strength, they could not compete with the immortal world on the battlefield. Even the immortal world that was now despised as the fallen immortal world. The immortal realm was indeed in decline. Compared with the real realm of immortals in its heyday, the so-called immortal realm today was nothing but a broken piece of rubble. The army of the immortal realm, which had once conquered the myriad worlds and was always victorious, had also withered. There were no more than 100 immortals who could put up a fight, and a dozen or so immortal paragons, and now, a few of them had been killed, and immortal kings had not appeared in the public eye for a very, very long time. However, the immortal world was, after all, the immortal world. The 10 senior immortals alone were enough to turn the 9 regions upside down. What's more, in addition to the immortals, there were too many treasures in the immortal world, such as the reverse Gisaurus pillar. In the previous battles, because the immortal world had too many concerns and did not want to spend too many resources, they were able to fight back and forth with the 9 regions. They were even repelled several times and suffered considerable losses. But now that the army of 9 regions had gathered in front of them, there was no room for mediation in the immortal world. After this great battle, they could launch a great purge, and then the 9 regions would truly fall into the control of the immortal world, and everything would usher in a turnaround. Thus, with a joyful mood, Shueiyue immediately returned to the celestial realm through the tunnel behind her. However, the moment she stepped onto the land of the celestial realm, she saw a devilishly handsome young man standing there. She was momentarily dazed and almost bumped into him. However, when she regained her consciousness, Shueiyue immediately sweated profusely and knelt down without hesitation. "Greetings, Senior Immortal Xiaoyao." "Oh, no need to be so reserved." The immortal named Carefree raised his hand, and Water Moon felt an irresistible force lift her up. Then, she flew uncontrollably towards a white jade palace tens of thousands of miles away. That was the frontline base for the immortal world's Great Purge plan. All the resources were concentrated in the white jade palace. "Tell the other immortal sovereigns the news. I'll stay here and watch for a while." Shueiyue knew that she had no room to argue. She obediently followed the immortal technique of Senior Immortal Xiaoyao and flew forward. The distance of tens of thousands of miles was almost instantly covered. However, when she looked back along the way, she saw Senior Immortal Xiaoyao's unprecedented concentration. Is it necessary to be so serious? It's just a group of lowly beings in the lower realm. Even if there are more of them, they are just a mob. With a little doubt, Shueiyue had already arrived in front of the White Jade Palace. In the White Jade Palace, several immortal sovereigns had gathered together. When they saw Shueiyue coming in, their expressions were different. At the moment when Shueiyue came in, the memory in her mind had been read by several immortal sovereigns, so everything that happened in the lower realm was clear to them. One of them, a tall man in a blood-colored battle robe, clenched his fist hard. What an unexpected surprise. This group of lowly beings actually sent themselves to our door. This really saves us a lot of trouble. However, a silver-haired woman was somewhat disapproving. "Feng Yun, don't think the enemy is too stupid. If they are really stupid enough to send themselves to our door to seek death, the Great Purge would have already been carried out. I think there is a mystery hidden in it. It's not the time to be optimistic. Senior Immortal Fengyun laughed and said, Senior Immortal Qinglu, you're too careful in everything you do. It's just a lower realm, why do we have to be so tied up? If we could put all of our troops in when the passage was opened and the reverse Gisaurus pillar was thrown, 9 regions would have been barren by now. I really don't understand what Xiaoyao is worried about. Even if the Swan Xian realm has withered, it's not like we can't even take down 9 regions, right? Compared with the Burning Legion or the Na-6 that we encountered in the expedition to the other world, I really can't see where 9 regions is strong. An old man gasped and said, the strong point is that it is the foundation of our immortal world. No matter how far we go on the immortal path, the starting point will not change. Since this land can give birth to immortals, it can never be underestimated. Senior Immortal Fengyun spread out his hands and said, forget it, I don't understand the thoughts of you old seniors. You are the generation that grew up in the immortal world, so you can't understand the feelings of us ascenders. The old man said softly, many people say that those who can transcend the tribulation and ascend must be the best. In fact, it's really absurd. When I first entered the Immortal sect 50,000 years ago, there were countless people who were more talented than me. Even when I finally ushered in the tribulation of ascension, I still knew a lot of experts. They just didn't want to take that step, not that they really couldn't do it. But those people are already dead. Senior Immortal Fengyun still showed great respect for the old man. He scratched his head and said, without the purification of pure immortal spirit, the lifespan of a cultivator will not exceed 10,000 years. Senior Lifeng, you have been cultivating for more than 50,000 years. No matter how powerful your companions were in the past, they are now just a handful of bones. What's more, 9 regions has been extracted by us once, and now it has long been broken. Ha ha ha, it's ridiculous that that group of wastes thought it was the will of heaven and kept shouting about the age of chaos. From the upper realm, they are just like ants. Since you're so confident, then you'll take the lead later. With that, Senior Immortal Xiaoyao slowly entered the arena, and then very naturally sat on the main seat of the White Jade Palace. It stood to reason that only the Immortal King was qualified to sit on this seat. However, when Senior Immortal Xiaoyao took his seat, no one questioned it. Under 1 person and above 10,000 people, this was the status of Xiaoyao. This time, we'll go all out. Senior Immortal Xiaoyao set the tone. I've observed that 9 regions has indeed sent out all their elites without any reservation. This time, it's a decisive battle. Therefore, when we make our move, we must have the momentum of a thunderbolt and annihilate all their forces in one battle. The several senior immortals were silent for a while. After communicating in private by various means, none of them raised any objection. Only Senior Immortal Qinglu lightly asked, how is His Majesty the Immortal King? Of course His Majesty is fine. Xiaoyao turned his gaze and asked, why do you ask? Senior Immortal Qinglu said, I'm just thinking that His Majesty the Immortal King was once the most warlike and the most powerful person in the immortal world. Even if he is old, he shouldn't be indifferent to such a good battle. It's just the dying struggle of a group of arrogant and ignorant people. There's no need to trouble His Majesty. Senior Immortal Qinglu asked, is that so? I heard that His Majesty was plotted against and seriously injured. Nonsense. Senior Immortal Xiaoyao's face remained unchanged. His handsome face was as firm as a stone sculpture. He said, with His Majesty's strength, who is qualified to hurt him, even if it's a sneak attack? Senior Immortal Qinglu said, I heard that the people in the lower realm detonated a fragment of an innate treasure. Who did you hear that from? Senior Immortal Qinglu covered her mouth and said with a smile, this is a woman's secret. Senior Immortal Xiaoyao wouldn't want to find out, right? I don't need to ask, as long as you do what you should do. With that, Senior Immortal Xiaoyao turned his face and looked at the others, saying, do you need to ask anything? The others naturally didn't need to ask. Very well, then everyone, please lead your team to the battle. After the senior immortals were dismissed in the White Jade Palace, most of them immediately went to gather people and prepare for the battle in the lower realm. However, there were two people who were much slower. Lifeng and Qinglu. Senior Immortal Qinglu, did you ask those questions just now casually, or do you mean something else? Senior Lifeng, what do you think? 9 regions is just a scabbard. The real problem comes from us. Lifeng said unceremoniously, if it was in the 10,000 Immortals period, it wouldn't take so much trouble to clean up the 9 regions. There's the passage between the 2 worlds and the reverse Gisaurus pillar. Now, the dilapidated appearance is really our own fault. If it was in the 10,000 Immortals period, the immortal world didn't need to rely on foreign objects, and there would be no need to carry out the great purge of 9 regions. Qinglu shook her head and said, Senior, what I want to say is, what happened to His Majesty the Immortal King? Like Fengyun, I am a younger generation immortal born in the immortal world. Since I was born, I have rarely seen the Immortal King. Almost all I saw was Senior Immortal Xiaoyao carrying out the Immortal King's order. Is there really nothing wrong with this? Today, he said that the Immortal King would not make a move. I really don't understand. Not long ago, the little princess fell in 9 regions. As her father, how could the Immortal King ignore it? Senior Immortal Lifeng was silent for a long time, and then said, It's better if you don't ask too much about this matter. It's not bad for you to be confused. Very well, then let this junior ask one last question. If you have to choose between Senior Immortal Xiaoyao and His Majesty the Immortal King, who would you choose? Senior Immortal Lifeng's answer was, I'll pretend that I didn't hear such treasonous words. Oh, thank you for your answer. I think I probably understand. Then, let's go to 9 regions to experience it. At the same time, somewhere far away from 9 regions and the immortal world. Wang Lu concentrated on controlling a needle-tip-sized flying sword, avoiding the small fireballs coming from all directions. The speed of the flying sword and the fireballs was extremely fast, especially those fireballs, which either turned or accelerated, blocking the flying sword's path. After a while, Wang Lu's flying sword was hit by the fireballs and burned. Well, the most difficult barrage only lasted for a while. It's really a big ominous sign. Before he could finish his sentence, another impatient voice sounded, Are you crazy? Can you find a wife if you play this kind of brainless game every day? Wang Lu smiled and said, It's hard to say whether I can find a wife or not, but the synchronization rate has been improved to about 80%. Don't look at me with such deep hatred. Leisure is also a key factor in the improvement of the synchronization rate. In the past 15 years, I've been trembling with fear. There's hardly a day of rest, but it's already dark under the lamp. Hee hee. On the other side, Wang Wu, who was sweating profusely, just sneered. However, just as she was about to brew her words, Wang Lu's face suddenly changed and became serious. What's going on in 9 regions? Wang Wu noticed that his hand was shaking slightly. How could so many people suddenly die? Finally. It's almost over. If nothing unexpected happens, Spirit Sword Mountain will usher in the end within 7 months. So, I'm here to shamelessly ask for a monthly ticket. I hope the last month can go smoothly. Chapter 827. In the passage between the 2 worlds, the sudden change in Wang Lu made Wang Wu a little nervous. What's going on? Wang Lu was silent for a while and then said in a deep voice, Something happened in 9 regions. The names in the Book of Life and Death are disappearing at an alarming rate. The Book of Life and Death, the thing that monitors all the cultivators in the continent, did you really use it? And it works here? Wang Wu was a little surprised, and then her face sank. A large number of names disappeared. Is there a second possibility? Wang Lu was silent. After a while, he shook his body and said, I also hope that there are other possibilities. For example, the space barrier between the passage between the 2 worlds and 9 regions is reblocked, so the Book of Life and Death is ineffective. But unfortunately, that's impossible. There is only one possibility for the names in the Book of Life and Death to change. That is, This immortal treasure has made contact with 9 regions and received the change in information. And the direct disappearance of a large number of names can only mean one thing. Has the immortal world launched a general attack? Maybe, but it stands to reason that the immortal world should not make their moves so soon. They have always been very cautious about their actions in 9 regions. When I sent the Gate of All Realms into the immortal world to detonate it, I vaguely felt that the immortal king was seriously injured after being plotted against. Before he recovered from his injury, the immortal world should not act so rashly. Did I underestimate the overall strength of the immortal world and the seriousness of the situation in the immortal world? When Wang Lu said this, he clenched his fists and said, "This time, being trapped in the passage between the 2 worlds is really a mistake." Wang Wu shook her head and said, "It's meaningless to blame yourself too much now. At that time, your choice can't be said to be wrong. If you must blame it, you can only blame Yan Luo for being too cunning." Before she finished speaking, Wang Wu found that her comfort was meaningless, because Wang Lu didn't pay attention to what she was saying at all. His attitude seemed to be very shaken, far from his usual calmness. Of course, this was not difficult to understand. In order to pursue the synchronization rate with the giant divine weapon, his mood had repeatedly fluctuated. His immortal heart cultivation was indeed not very stable, and it was very easy to be shaken by external factors. Moreover, the current situation had a special meaning for him. More than 200 years ago, it was the same person who supported the great Liang alone. It was the same person who watched helplessly as his brothers and sisters died one by one. It was hard to imagine how a person could endure the same torture twice. Thinking of this, Wang Wu also felt a slight pain in her heart. Looking at Wang Lu's body swaying in pain, she felt that she had to do something. No matter how many ridiculous things Wang Lu had done to her these days, at least in this life, she was his master. She should shelter him from the wind and rain. Of course, the current situation was extremely dangerous, and it wasn't something that anyone could resist. But at the very least, she should stand behind him and provide him with gentle care. However, I don't have a clue about being gentle and caring. Have I ever been gentle in my life? It's so hard for me to suddenly do something like this. Forget it, I'll use my imagination. Thus, Wang Wu gradually disappeared into the darkness of the passage between the 2 worlds with a belly full of contemplation. In this regard, Wang Lu was unaware of it. He just stared intently at the Book of Life and Death, looking at the names that quickly disappeared on it, trying to restore and infer the truth in his mind. What kind of war could make the 9 regions pay such a heavy price in an instant? Even if it was an all-out war in the immortal world, was there no room for strategic depth in a place as big as 9 regions? And why did the number of people disappear so evenly? The cultivators of different legions in different areas were dying out at almost the same speed. This meant that not only the immortal world was engaged in an all-out war, but the 9 regions had also mobilized all its forces to face the enemy on the battlefield. However, this was unreasonable. Any sane person would not fight a head-on war with the immortal world. Once the immortal world arrived, the first thing to do was to evacuate everyone. And then what? Wang Lu smiled bitterly. If he was down there, perhaps he would also be helpless. His comprehensive strength was not as good as the others, and the only person who had a chance to reverse the situation was hung in the sky. How could this situation be broken? How could it be broken? However, just when Wang Lu was gradually discouraged, the disappearance of the names in the Book of Life and Death suddenly slowed down a lot. Judging from the change of those names, the situation of the war should have changed in a favorable way. The mainstay cultivators were no longer sacrificed and were replaced by cannon fodder. At this point, it meant that the occupation had finally returned to the control of the 9 regions. Wang Lu took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and operated the deduction technique to the extreme. Suddenly, a white smoke rose from the top of his head, and in his mind, the panoramic view of the 9 regions gradually emerged. Although many details were still vague and difficult to distinguish, Wang Lu could generally grasp the change in the war situation. After a fierce battle, the 9 regions side began to retreat in an orderly manner, while the immortal world side was obviously unable to catch up. Or, if they chased a little bit fiercely, they would be hit head-on. It should be Supreme Hichu who personally presided over the death to immortal sword array, which was the most powerful means of attack in the 9 regions at present. The 3 immortal swords, Extinguish Immortal, Trap Immortal, and Kill Immortal, should be handed over to Zhang Zai, Xiang Liang, and Xiong Hua respectively. When the 3 of them drove the test machine, their combat power was comparable to that of a supreme. Under the blessing of the death to immortal sword array and the great array of 9 regions, they were even more unstoppable. In addition, it should be the Western Continent army led by Aya who covered the retreat of the main force. These foreign reinforcements were not registered in the Book of Life and Death, but Aya's name was placed in a conspicuous position by Wang Lu. Since the beginning of the retreat, Aya's name had been constantly shaking, like a fallen leaf in the wind and rain. However, after many twists and turns, she finally stubbornly left a thick ink mark in the Book of Life and Death. It was just that the process was difficult, which showed the danger of the situation just now. Aya had always been a head-on person. At the beginning of the war, she didn't fight desperately, but instead, fought desperately when retreating. Obviously, she bore great pressure as the guardian. Since Aya was like this, Golden King would not stand idly by. Right now, it could be said that he and 9 regions suffered together. Then, the Zaku army was completely dispersed and organized into different legions. In order to use the Zaku army unity array, the several key props that were needed were still in Wang Lu's hands. After the division, the one responsible for the specific command should be Golden King, because it was necessary to use the many different functions of Zaku to play a core role in each team. This required an extremely high command ability. After the death of Kuchin, almost no one in 9 regions could have this qualification. Even if a few people had the ability, their prestige was not enough to convince the masses. Only Golden King, the arrogant and conceited supreme leader of Western Continent, could rely on his unreasonably terrifying command ability to control everything. In her letter, Aya once mentioned that when she was in Western Continent, she played military chess with Golden King. In 10 games, she lost 10 times. The relationship between victory and defeat seemed to have broken away from the normal logic of cause and effect. At the beginning of the battle, the result was already doomed. And this gap in ability was the gap between Aya, the king of Bretonia, and Golden King, the supreme leader of Western Continent. Golden King's reinforcement was really a stroke of genius. At this point, Wang Lu suddenly felt a sharp pain in his head, and the battle map in his mind disappeared. This was the result of a large overdraft of computing power, which meant that it was difficult to recover the deduction in a short period of time. However, there was no need for him to forcibly deduce anything. Judging from the current situation, 9 regions had not fallen into the worst situation. Although the casualties were heavy, which could be said to be a serious injury, the foundation was still there, and they still had the capital to continue to fight against the immortal world. Of course, after this battle, the time in 9 regions was getting more and more urgent. If Wang Lu could not break the space barrier and return to 9 regions as soon as possible, perhaps he would never have to go back. When he thought of this, he suddenly heard the voice of Wang Wu behind him when he felt a little annoyed. "Little Lu, don't always find trouble for yourself. Come on, I found something for you to relieve your boredom. Let's play to relieve your anger." At that time, Wang Lu could not help but laugh in spite of himself, thinking, this guy is really broad-minded. Even at this time, he still has such a carefree bird appearance. Of course, that pure smiling face was the goal of his unremitting efforts in his 2 lives. However, when Wang Lu looked back and saw Wang Wu and the toy in her hand, his face suddenly sank. "Are you kidding me?" Wang Wu was a little surprised. "Why do you say that? What's that in your hand?" "Yen Lua's body. Didn't you say that you want to dig a pit and bury it?" "I just dug it out. Look, it's still very fresh. The soft places are soft and the hard places are hard. It's indeed the body of an immortal. Even the smell is quite fragrant. What the hell are you licking? I'm asking you, why did you dig this thing out?" Wang Wu looked inexplicable. "What else can I do? I want to whip the corpse to vent my anger." Whip the corpse to vent my anger? When did I say that I wanted to do such a thing? Do you still need to say it?" I can see that you are in a bad mood now, just like a long-term constipation patient. Even your normal thinking ability has begun to be affected, so I helped you to do psychological counseling. Hee hee, aren't I very gentle and considerate? Wang Wu shrugged with a smile, completely ignoring Wang Lu's widened eyes. She threw Yanluo's body over and said, "Play with it. If you get tired of it, quickly return to normal. We don't have much time left. We have to go back to 9 regions as soon as possible. What's the point of playing with this thing except to make me a complete pervert?" Wang Wu said with a smile, "Why do you ask such a stupid question? How could you not know that the more perverted a person is, the more powerful he is?" Wang Lu looked at the woman in white in front of him and thought that what she said was indeed true. At least, this guy was an excellent example. On the other hand, he was indeed a little moved by what she said. Corpse abuse. Although it was indeed very tasteless and disgusting, Sun Booping might have done it in the past. If it was for the synchronization rate, perhaps he should give it a try. Let's continue to ask for the monthly votes. It's getting closer and closer to the end. Because the monthly votes list has been combined, you can vote for both Qidian and QQ reading. Friends who have accounts, please vote for 2 to commemorate it. Chapter 828. To torture or not to torture, this was indeed a question. Looking at the extremely fresh immortal corpse on the ground, Wang Lu could not help but fall into deep thought. This was the first time he had carefully observed Yanluo's corpse. Previously, he had hastily buried her after killing her, so he did not think too much about it. But now, Yanluo had been seriously injured before she died, so there was a huge and terrifying hole in the waist of the corpse. Many places were completely scorched by the positron cannon, but there were still places that should be there. If he had to use it, it could still be used. Not far away from him, Wang Wu was intently observing Wang Lu's every move. She was the one who suggested the idea of torturing the corpse, but she actually did not want to see Wang Lu put it into action. It was necessary to relieve pressure and adjust his mood, but it was another matter to do so by hook or by crook. A person might really be more powerful the more perverted he was. However, if he embarked on the path of perversion in pursuit of strength, and eventually lost his sense of self, that would be putting the cart before the horse. In the past, Wang Lu did not need others to remind him of the meaning of the bottom line. However, over the years, in order to pursue the synchronization rate, Wang Lu's temperament had actually been greatly shaken. Wang Wu wanted to see what his current situation was like. Could he still control himself? Of course, even if Wang Lu did not control himself in the end and carried out his perverted behavior, Wang Wu did not intend to stop him. No matter what decision he made, she would be a strong supporter. Even if it was a path to purgatory, she would accompany him to the end. But if possible, it was better to take the normal path. Under Wang Wu's gaze, Wang Lu finally made a move. He leaned down, stared at Yanluo's corpse seriously, and then stretched out his hand. "Damn, so direct?" Wang Wu immediately exclaimed. In her impression, little Lu, who was not very open in the matter between men and women, had actually learned the trick of opening the door and showing her chest. He stretched out his hand and pressed it on the other party's chest. Wang Lu completely ignored the clamor behind him. His right hand paused for a moment on the slightly bulging chest of the corpse before moving all the way to the neck, jaw, lips. Only when it reached the wound on the forehead did it finally stop. Then, he asked, "What do you think if I resurrect her now? Although your principle of not abusing corpses is admirable, don't you think that this is putting the cart before the horse?" Wang Lu said, "What's the point of torturing corpses? Does bullying things that don't know how to talk really make people feel better?" I was doubtful about that. No matter how I thought about it, it would be more fun to torture a living person, right? Yanluo put me in such a difficult situation, but I killed her with a sword. It was too easy. Alright, but the dead can't be resurrected. How do you plan to resurrect her? Wang Lu said, "I checked just now and was sure of one thing. The way of existence of immortals is completely different from ours. At least this Yanluo can no longer be regarded as a human being in the strict sense. Wang Wu went up and glanced at Yen Luo. She curled her lips and said, just because her breasts are not big, you deprive her of her right to be a human being? Aren't you too cruel? But now that little Ling has become a fox, I'm not afraid of accidentally hurting her. I mean, Yinluo's immortal body makes her life form very unique. What we see now is not only her physical body but also her primordial spirit. Or, she doesn't have a primordial spirit in the traditional sense at all. She's like a mechanical puppet, and about half of her physical body is still preserved. Wang Wu thought for a while and said, if you re-inject vitality, even if it can't be restored to its original state, it can be restored in a short time. But first, are you sure that you can exert enough force to make this stop machine move? Second, if you really resurrect her, are you going to fight Xia Yu again? Of course, I'm sure about the first question. As long as it's something like an elixir, it's enough to activate her. As for the second question, Xia Yu won't come. Wang Lu was very sure, he won't jump into a dead end. And isn't it better if he really comes? It's also quite fun to fuck that old thing again. If I can also use the projection of the Xianyuan sword empty-handed, then I'll make a big profit. That's right. The dignified immortal king shouldn't be stupid enough to let you kill his projection avatar at will. Since you've made up your mind, just do it. I'll protect you. Wang Lu smiled, and then the skin on his fingertips suddenly separated. A drop of bright red blood dripped from it and fell on the broken gem on Yenluo's forehead. That was the essence of Wang Lu's origin. Any drop contained the vitality of more than 10,000 people, but at this time, it was only given to Yenluo alone. The next moment, the long-dead gem on Yenluo's head suddenly trembled. The crack was like a living thing, completely absorbing Wang Lu's blood. The gem fragments gradually softened, wriggled, stuck together, and continued to fuse. Finally, it became a clear and flawless crystal gem. At the same time, Yenluo opened her eyes. It's you? Yenluo didn't seem to be surprised by her resurrection. She, who had been reborn, still looked very weak, and had no intention of fighting with force at all. Yes, it's me. How does it feel to be resurrected? It's very subtle. I seem to have forgotten a lot of things. Yenluo nodded, closed her eyes to meditate for a while, and then chuckled softly, but from the current situation, I succeeded. If you still have a place to go, you won't waste your time on a dead person like me. Wang Lu said, I won't waste any time on you now, so you don't have to look at me with such expectant eyes. I won't rape you, and I won't let her rape you. If you want to experience the pleasure, you can only do it yourself. I woke you up to ask you a few questions. Yenluo smiled and said, why should I answer? Because you have no choice. Wang Lu said and clenched his fists, which immediately made Yenluo show a painful expression. Since you have been resurrected with my blood, you can't go against my will anymore. Tell me, how much do you know about sun booping? Wang Lu had wanted to ask someone this question for a long time. If he wanted to synchronize with the giant divine weapon, it was necessary to understand sun booping's life. However, even his wife, Tetragon, could not say that she fully understood him. After decades of running in, they had only pushed the synchronization rate to 70%. As for the rest, they had to fill in the gaps through other means. As the lifelong enemy of sun booping, the fallen immortal side was naturally an excellent source of information. Sun booping. He was one of us, but after living in 9 regions for a long time, he chose to betray us. Yenluo's voice was a bit stiff. He is a traitor without a plan and is doomed to despair in the abyss of blood and fire. That's it? Wang Lu was a bit dumbfounded. You should be a small leader in the immortal world, right? You're the one who was possessed by the immortal King Xia Yu. How come the information is so blocked? Why should I know such a trivial thing? Yenluo said, the Dixian camp established by sun booping is only famous in 9 regions. The immortal world has never put him in their eyes. This is really a sad story. Wang Lu sighed and said, you don't know about sun booping, so tell me about the immortal world, especially about the immortal King Xia Yu. Tell me as much as you know. Yenluo suddenly seemed to struggle very much. She shook her body desperately, but she was completely unable to get rid of the control of Wang Lu. She could only grit her teeth and say what she knew word by word. The immortal king, and, Xiaoyao, no. When she said the sixth word, Yenluo's voice suddenly stopped, and her whole white jade-like face turned red and purple. With a muffled bang, her face exploded into pieces. The secrecy measures of the immortal world are really powerful. Wang Lu was stunned as he reached out to remove the pieces of flesh and brain on his clothes, but, this is also a confession. What is the dirty thing between the immortal king and Xiaoyao? Don't tell me it means impotent? However, no matter what it was doomed to not get the answer at this time. After Yenluo's head exploded, her body was completely destroyed. No matter how great her ability was, she could not be resurrected. Wang Wu, who watched the whole process, could not help but shake her head and said, as a result, it seems that there is no gain from your hard work. There is basically no new information about Sun Buping, and the immortal king and senior immortal Xiaoyao are also confused. It seems that it's a bit of a loss to waste a drop of your precious blood. It's not that there is no gain at all. For example, Sun Buping struggled all his life, but in the eyes of the immortal world, he is just an ant. It's impossible for him not to have any thoughts about this. Another example is the immortal king's possession of others at will. Does senior immortal Xiaoyao know about it? If he knows, what would he think? If he doesn't know? Is it possible that he doesn't know? While saying that, Wang Lu frowned. Because each of these two questions seemed to hide a great secret. However, the truth was shrouded in a layer of fog, and no matter how hard he tried, he could not see it clearly. So Wang Lu once again fell into contemplation. His mind, which had just cooled down, began to work at a high speed again, trying to piece together the complete truth from the limited information. These two questions. Intuitively, they were really important. This time, he didn't know how long he pondered. After all, Wang Lu was not omniscient and omnipotent, so he never found the answer. During his contemplation, the passage between the two worlds suddenly trembled slightly. Then, countless people's surprised voices exploded in the passage, awakening him from his contemplation. It's connected, it's finally connected. Wang Lu, can you hear us? I know you can hear us. Wang Lu, when will you come back? The voices from countless old friends of the Wanxian League made Wang Lu slightly stunned. You've built the Sky Tower? The answer to him was the voice of Feng Yin, weak, tired, but full of hope. Yes, the Sky Tower has been erected in Spirit Sword Mountain. Relying on the guidance of the Spirit Sword Heavenly Talisman in your hand, we finally opened a gap in the space barrier. Then, as long as we expand this gap, you can come back, right? Wang Lu nodded and said, yes, it's been hard on you this time. However, as soon as his voice fell, Wang Lu saw that the gap that had just been opened in the passage between the two worlds quietly closed again. I'm afraid it's not that easy to get Wang Lu back. The voice of senior immortal Xiaoyao abruptly came in. Chapter 829. The dawn of hope only illuminated for a moment before it was swallowed up by the darkness. Senior immortal Xiaoyao resealed the gap in the passage with a tyrannical and irresistible force. The voice from 9 regions fell silent with the disappearance of the light. In the passage between the two worlds, only a young man who looked as handsome as a demon was left. I've wanted to meet you for a long time, but I didn't expect it to be in this way. Wang Lu, or Ouyang Shang. Wang Lu looked at the person in front of him and frowned slightly. You really know a lot, my brain-dead fan. Senior immortal Xiaoyao smiled and said, in a sense, I really admire your willpower. You traveled around the world in the form of a remnant soul and then returned to this land of death. If it were me, I'm afraid I would linger on halfway and forget to return. In your long journey, you have really experienced several wonderful places in the world. You can be like a fish in water in it, and your achievements are no less than those in 9 regions. Moreover, there is no world-ending crisis there. No matter how long the hands of our immortal world are, they can't reach too far away. So, why did you come back? For the woman around you? For this land, or for the sense of mission? Wang Lu did not answer, but looked at the person in front of him more solemnly. Senior Immortal Xiaoyao knew too much. No one in 9 regions knew about his experience after the death of Ouyang Shang and before the birth of Wang Lu. Even he himself had many vague memories. However, Senior Immortal Xiaoyao seemed to know it like the palm of his hand, which was really unreasonable. Don't doubt it too much. I read the fragment of the Gate of All Realms and got the coordinates of countless worlds. I didn't accompany you to complete that journey, and I didn't see your privacy. Wait a minute, have you read the fragment of the Gate of All Realms? Wang Lu immediately caught the flaw in this sentence. The Gate of All Realms was brought to 9 regions by Mr. Feng Yu from the immortal world. Then, in the self-explosion of Ouyang Shang, it accompanied his remnant soul to travel around the world and then return to 9 regions. Wang Lu used it as a hidden weapon to plot against the immortal King Xiaoyu. And there seemed to be no room for Senior Immortal Xiaoyao to intervene. There are some details that you don't need to care so much about. Otherwise, you won't even be surprised, and the conversation won't be able to continue. By the way, fellow Daoist over there, you don't have to be so wary of me. I'm just an avatar of Senior Immortal Xiaoyao. Let alone fighting against the 2 most powerful cultivators in 9 regions, I'm afraid even Daoist Master King Pill can destroy me. As Senior Immortal Xiaoyao said, his eyes shifted and happened to meet Wang Wu, who was hiding in the shadows. Wang Wu remained indifferent, and she still insisted that her disguise hadn't been seen through. The immortal sword in her hand concealed its edge, and it was ready to erupt at any moment. Senior Immortal Xiaoyao shook his head indifferently and said to Wang Lu, I asked you to come here not only to see you but also to tell you a few things. Wang Lu asked curiously, a few things? What do we have to talk about? Of course there is. Ah, seeing this, I'm more relieved. I think you've already guessed a lot of things. Senior Immortal Xiaoyao happened to see the body of Yen Luo on the ground. He walked forward with a little regret and said, Can I keep her body? Wang Lu was silent for a moment and then asked, Can she still be resurrected? Senior Immortal Xiaoyao said, Strictly speaking, her whole head has been destroyed, so after the resurrection, she will no longer be herself, but a backup that she made with me before she went to war. Backup? Senior Immortal Xiaoyao didn't explain and continued, Resurrection out of nothing can also be done. However, Yen Luo is my trusted subordinate and has made great contributions. I can't let her body be exposed here. Wang Lu said, Yen Luo. Is she an artificial life? Considering Yen Luo's previous resurrection and her mechanical puppet-like body structure, Wang Lu really didn't think that she could be regarded as a human being. Senior Immortal Xiaoyao said, Oh, of course, Yen Luo is a human being, a living person. Artificial life has never been successful in the real sense. Many people think that immortals are omnipotent, but this is obviously impossible. If immortals are really omnipotent, why can't they even protect their own home? Why do they have to absorb the power of 9 regions? Some laws are the truth of heaven and earth, which even Swan Xian people can't disobey, such as the creation of life. We can create lifelike puppets, which will run for thousands of years without weakening in power. At the same time, there are countless magical abilities, but after all, they are not human beings. However, you have also found that Yen Luo is very different from human beings in the real sense. In fact, most people in the immortal world are already like her. Although they are human beings, they are very different from human beings. You can guess where the difference is? Can she be possessed by the immortal king? At this moment, Senior Immortal Xiaoyao showed an unusually sincere smile. Sure enough, you're worthy of being the person I'm optimistic about. Since you found it, it's convenient to talk about some things. You should understand that there are many things that even I can't say. When Wang Lu heard this, he suddenly felt that the fog in his mind began to dissipate, revealing a bit of his ferocious true appearance. In that case, why don't we talk in the form of mutual questions? The smile in Senior Immortal Xiaoyao's eyes became more intense as he said, Okay, you go first. Wang Lu thought for a while and cautiously raised the first question. Previously, Senior Immortal Paksu said that in order to prolong his life, the immortal king Xia Yu occupied the body of his own bloodline descendants, such as Xia Xiaohe. But Yan Luo is obviously not his child, so why could she be possessed by him? How much does Yan Luo's special life form have to do with the immortal king's possession? Since it was about the immortal king, of course, Senior Immortal Xiaoyao could not answer directly, so he asked another question. Just now, I said that there are supreme laws between heaven and earth that no one can transcend. So do you think that even in the immortal world, can anyone break the supreme laws and achieve true immortality? What are the consequences of forcibly trying to break through the supreme laws? Upon hearing this question, Wang Lu inwardly understood. No one was immortal. Even the immortal king could not break the constraints of this supreme law. His struggle was futile, but it caused all kinds of side effects. For example, Yan Luo's non-human life form was probably one of the side effects. At the same time, Senior Immortal Paksu thought that Xia Yu only possessed his own bloodline, but Yan Luo's experience proved that the scope of the immortal king's action had long been expanded. Then, is there no objection? Let's not talk about what the people of Xia family think. Is Yan Luo willing to be used as a vessel by the immortal king? Senior Immortal Xiaoyao then raised another question. Why do you think I came here with my avatar? Why do you think I can read the information on the fragment of the Gate of All Realms? Another fog in Wang Lu's mind was dispelled. His avatar came here to act in secret. He forcibly closed the passage between the two worlds using the power of his own body, which was also a show for others to see. His avatar, on the other hand, was to act in secret. And why could he read the fragment of the Gate of All Realms? Of course, it was because after the Gate of All Realms was sent back to the immortal world by Xia Yu, it had passed through the hands of Senior Immortal Xiaoyao. Since Senior Immortal Xiaoyao could read the information on it, of course, he should also be able to detect the tricks that Wang Lu had done in it. If he could remind the immortal king in time. No, it should be said that since even he could detect the abnormality on the fragment, Xia Yu could certainly detect it. But in the end, Xia Yu was still seriously injured by the self-explosion of the fragment of the Gate of All Realms. What did this mean? Did Senior Immortal Xiaoyao do anything in it? The answer seemed to be self-evident. Wang Lu's heartbeat began to accelerate slightly. The news brought by Senior Immortal Xiaoyao was really unexpected. If it was true, this almost desperate war finally ushered in the greatest dawn. However, it was a matter of great importance and could not be easily believed. Wang Lu asked, "Why did you tell me this? You are a senior immortal, I'm afraid you don't need to worry about being possessed, right?" This was also inferred from his previous experience. Among the several immortals in the lower realm, Kanglin had been studied for 15 years. The mystery of Senior Immortal was almost clear at a glance, but Wang Lu never found that his body composition was similar to Yan Luo's. In addition, Senior Immortal Paksu did not show any signs of being possessed until his death. Only Xia Xiaohe and Yan Luo, two immortals below the Senior Immortal level, were possessed by Xia Yu. Senior Immortal Xiaoyao smiled when he heard this and asked an almost irrelevant question. What do you think the immortal world should be like? Wang Lu said, for most cultivators, it is a place where countless ideals gather. In fact, the immortal world was once glorious. Senior Immortal Xiaoyao's tone was flat, but it constantly revealed sadness. The immortal world in its heyday was second to none in the world. Even the gods of the Western continent had to bow down to the immortal world. But now, there are only more than 100 immortals, and the immortal world has almost fallen. They even have to pin their last hope on the lower realm. What do you think caused this huge gap? Upon hearing this, Wang Lu almost sucked in a breath of cold air. There was only one answer to Senior Immortal Xiaoyao's question. The immortal king Xia Yu needed to bear the responsibility for all this. When he thought about it carefully, it seemed that everything was reasonable. An old immortal king who wanted to live forever, and a ghost father who would do anything in order to survive, even his own daughter. Under the leadership of such a person, how could the immortal world not decline? The law of heaven and earth could not be violated. The longer a person lived, the higher the price needed to prolong his life when he was about to die. If the immortal king had already reached the end of his life, then the price of continuing to maintain his life was probably, and the purpose of senior immortal Xiaoyao's trip was also clear. Do you want to use me to get rid of the immortal king, the biggest scourge? That's a good idea, and I'm very interested. Then, from now on, please take care of yourself. Senior immortal Xiaoyao said and stretched out his hand. At the same time, a gap appeared in the barrier of the passage between the two worlds. I'm an immortal, a loyal subject of the immortal king. I won't cooperate with you to do anything. Senior immortal Xiaoyao said seriously, if you have any unreasonable expectations, it will only waste your remaining hope. Wang Lu said, there's no need to remind me of this. I don't believe any of you, and I won't let any of you go. Die in peace, I will give you a quick death. Oh, that's a big tone. Let me wait and see. Xiaoyao said, lifted the remaining body of Yan Luo, and flashed away along the gap in the space barrier. The next moment, the voice from Spirit Sword Mountain sounded again. Wang Lu, when can you come back? We can't hold on any longer. Chapter 830. In Blue River region, a thick layer of dark clouds covered the sky and shrouded the vast land in shadow. The thick darkness infected the earth and turned the land into a mass of soft mud. The mud rolled and everything on the ground was swallowed up. Instead, filthier mud surged up from the bottom. It was like a dark ocean, turning the once beautiful mountains, rivers, and vegetation into nothingness. In the middle of the Black Sea, there was a tall and straight mountain like a sharp sword. It was like a lonely boat in a storm, drifting in the wind and rain, but it didn't break. From time to time, dazzling sword light shot out from the mountain, splitting the Black Sea and setting off stormy waves. However, under the endless darkness, the sword light quickly dissipated. The black waves that surrounded the mountain swept back again. Above the dark clouds, there was a sacred light. The immortals stepped on the cloud cover, their eyes penetrated the clouds and watched everything that happened under their feet. The one who took the lead was a handsome and enchanting man. He was the leader of the senior immortals in the immortal world, Xiaoyao. Behind him were 6 senior immortals, including Lai Feng, Qinglu, and Feng Yun, as well as more than 70 immortals. Such a lineup had exceeded 2/3 of the total power of the immortal world. Considering that there were people guarding the immortal world, it could be said that the immortal world had turned out in full force. Under such a huge force, no one and no sect could withstand it. The immortals hadn't really made their move. They just casually laid out a dark disaster immortal technique, which almost sank the Spirit Sword Mountain, which had been passed down for thousands of years, into the bottom of the Black Sea. It seemed that the destruction of the Lingjian school was only a matter of time. On the top of the cloud, senior immortal Feng Yun paced a bit bored. Out of the corner of his eyes, he saw that senior immortal Xiaoyao was staring at the world under his feet. He couldn't help but laugh and said, Xiaoyao, aren't you making a big fuss over a minor issue? It's just an immortal cultivation sect in the lower realm. Any of our senior immortals can take it down single-handedly. Is it necessary to call so many people over? Xiaoyao didn't look back and completely ignored the complaints of senior immortal Feng Yun. The latter just raised his eyebrows and was accustomed to Xiaoyao's indifference. At this moment, a short immortal took 2 steps forward and came to Feng Yun's side. This person still had the appearance of a child, with delicate features and a childish face. However, he wore a golden crown on his head and stood on auspicious clouds, exuding a luxurious aura. Elder brother Feng Yun, don't just stand there and talk. If we didn't dispatch so many people at once, I'm afraid we would have been stopped at the periphery of the southern heaven region. How could we go straight to this place? Those barbarians of the western continent really do have some skill. Senior immortal Feng Yun glanced at him. Brother Jintong? I heard that you chased after him alone and fell into an ambush. You were almost heavily injured and only escaped after losing the 100 treasures pouch. Senior immortal Jintong's face suddenly turned ugly. The Golden King is a western continent powerhouse who has been deified, and the Night Kings under him are not inferior to him. These people also have the support of the great array of 9 regions, so it's naturally difficult for me to fight them alone. Moreover, even if I lose, at least I will be fighting for the immortal world. And what were you, who boasted of your ability in battle, doing at that time? No matter what I was doing at that time, in short, I was not losing the face of the immortal world. You. A group of stray dogs that have nowhere to hide after being chased by the Pantheon bastards can still bite off a few pieces of flesh from your body. I don't think the other party is too strong, it's just that you haven't fought for a long time, so your skills are rusty. Senior Immortal Lifeng lightly said, both of you, shut up. Feng Yun and Jintong glared at each other in disgust, but no one spoke again. Senior Immortal Lifeng was not a strong immortal, but compared to the 2 juniors, his words carried a lot of weight. Xiaoyao, this old man also doesn't understand. Why do you attach so much importance to this mountain? Senior Immortal Lifeng asked, after we break through the line of defense of the 9 regions people, we should send down more inverse Gisaurus pillars as soon as possible. As long as the other 8 regions are destroyed, even if these ants try their best to resist, it will be useless. Since Senior Immortal Lifeng had spoken, Xiaoyao could not be indifferent. With the overwhelming strength of the immortal world, as long as they don't do stupid things like killing each other. Xiaoyao said and glanced at Feng Yun and Jintong, no matter what tactics we adopt, we will win in the end. Whether we divide our forces in many places or gather in one place. There is no singularity in 9 regions that can support them to make a comeback. This matter has been confirmed by Mr. Feng Yu and the little princess. Lifeng said, in that case, what are you worried about? My concern is that Spirit Sword Mountain is the only variable in this battle. Variable? Senior Immortal Xiaoyao said in a flat tone, according to my calculation, no matter what strategy we adopt, we will win in the end. But as long as Spirit Sword Mountain is still there, our victory can't be regarded as flawless, and there will be a negligible possibility of failure. Before he could finish, he was interrupted by the laughter of Senior Immortal Feng Yun. In that case, let's eliminate this variable. What's the point of letting so many of us stand there stupidly? The next moment, Senior Immortal Feng Yun ignored Xiaoyao's military order and punched straight down. The dark clouds rolled, and a thunderbolt fell from the sky and landed on the peak of Spirit Sword Mountain. Suddenly, the whole mountain was shrouded in lightning. The steep peaks and lush greenery on the mountain gradually melted under the roasting of the lightning. Ha ha ha, this 4 in 9 divine tribulation tastes good, right? Bastards. The thunderbolt that fell from the clouds was the legendary divine tribulation thunder. For the cultivators of 9 regions, the divine tribulation thunder was the end of cultivation and the strongest and fiercest test in the world. As long as they survived the divine tribulation, the cultivators could temper themselves with immortal spirit and ascend to the immortal world. However, from ancient times to the present, how many amazing experts had fallen in front of the divine tribulation thunder? Let alone the 4 in 9 divine tribulation. However, such a terrifying natural disaster was just a casual blow from Senior Immortal Feng Yun. Of course, this was not because he really had supreme power, but because the immortals in the immortal world had the natural ability to control the laws of heaven and earth in 9 regions. When Senior Immortal Feng Yun sent down the divine tribulation, his own power only accounted for 10%. He borrowed the power of 9 regions to destroy the last guardian of this continent. However, after the time it took to drink a cup of tea, the lightning disappeared, and the Spirit Sword Mountain stood tall. There were only a few ugly black spots on the surface, and these spots were healing at a speed that was discernible to the naked eye. Ha ha ha, it seems that your skill is a lot rusty. You can't even destroy a small mountain with the power of the divine tribulation. What qualifications do you have to laugh at me? Senior Immortal Jintong was not polite at all. Enough, can't you see that there's something wrong with this mountain? Senior Immortal Lifeng opened his mouth to stop the 2 people. His 2 turbid eyeballs turned at a strange speed and angle. His eyes directly penetrated the mountain protection array of the Spirit Sword Mountain and saw the real situation inside in a very short period of time. This mountain is full of experts. More than half of the group of people who overestimated themselves and besieged the Against the World Dragon Pillar were hidden in Spirit Sword Mountain. Judging from the joint strength of these people, a mere 4 and 9 divine tribulations was nothing. But, why? It's obviously unreasonable to do this. After the battle in the southern heaven region, they would recognize the difference in strength between the two sides. Wouldn't it be like sitting ducks if they gathered together? It's better to give up defending and wait for more of the Gisaurus pillar to descend, and then split up to attack. Perhaps that would give us more trouble. Xiaoyao said, because the people of 9 regions can give up any place, but they can't give up Spirit Sword Mountain. They built a tower in the mountain and overestimated themselves by imitating the Gisaurus pillar, trying to break the barrier of 9 regions and bring Wang Lu back from the passage between the two worlds. Wang Lu? That king of ants? Do they think that if Wang Lu comes back, 9 regions will have a chance to win? Senior Immortal Feng Yun smiled incomprehensibly and said, and then your calculation also says that as long as Wang Lu comes back, 9 regions will have a chance of survival? That's really strange. What's so special about that kid? It's a pity that you stopped me from coming here before, otherwise, would have personally taken off his head and studied it. Upon hearing this, Senior Immortal Qing Lu sneered and said, there's nothing special about Wang Lu. He just killed Moon Breeze, captured Kanglan alive, and plotted the death of Paksu and the little princess. We really shouldn't have stopped you before. If you were replaced with Kanglan, it would be much better than now. Ha ha ha, Sister Qing Lu is really not willing to give me face. But, in any case, it's too boring to stand here stupidly. It doesn't matter how cautious you are about Spirit Sword Mountain, but in the end, we still have to make a move, right? In that case, I'll do it for you. With that, Senior Immortal Feng Yun directly broke through the clouds under his feet and rushed towards Spirit Sword Mountain like a meteorite. You? Senior Immortal Jintong's eyes widened, and then he said to Xiaoyao softly and hurriedly, Brother Xiaoyao, this guy completely ignored your order. It's really outrageous. Xiaoyao's expression remained unchanged as he gently nodded and said, since he has already gone down. Jintong, you should also go down. What? Me? In addition, Lei Tian, Shueiyue, and Fan Yun, you guys go down with Jintong to test the foundation of Spirit Sword Mountain. Don't be anxious, just put pressure on them bit by bit and see how long they can hold on. Upon hearing this, Senior Immortal Qing Lu was slightly surprised and said, not anxious? I remember that His Majesty the Immortal King once said. Senior Immortal Xiaoyao said, there's no need to be anxious. Don't forget, this is probably our last battle. After destroying the 9 regions, we have no other worlds to destroy. Senior Immortal Qing Lu said with a faint smile, oh, if you say so, we should really cherish this battle. So, why don't I go down and play for a while? Senior Immortal Xiaoyao nodded and said, yes, remember not to worry, let them experience the taste of despair. With that, he suddenly raised his head and looked into the endless distance. Wang Lu, I have done everything that should be done. Now, it's up to you to understand all this and make the right response. Chapter 831. Report. Golden Bridge of Spirit Creek Town. Hey, where's Elder Lu Xian? He went to support the front line. Right now, I'm the temporary commander. If there's anything, just tell me. Ah, red-robed ancestor? How come you? Are you seriously injured? Less nonsense. Tell me the situation. What happened to the Golden Bridge of Spirit Creek Town? Report to Ancestor, the Golden Bridge mechanism was destroyed, and the magical ability of so close yet worlds apart was broken, so it's time to let go of that position. Call back all the people guarding the bridge. Don't fight the fallen immortals outside the cloud and Mr. Ray. Slowly consume them with the support of the inner ring. Yes. Report. The cloud and Mr. Ray Heavenly Wolf Array is seriously damaged. Request to send someone to repair it immediately. Send someone? Who else can we send now? The reserve team has basically been sent. Are the people of 10,000 Art Sect still there? Report to Ancestor, the the people of 10,000 Arts sect have just gone to the White Tiger Array. The damage there is even more serious. I'm afraid the maintenance personnel won't be able to withdraw for a while. Well, the White Tiger Array can't be lost, let the people of Heavenly Wolf Array report. The White Tiger Array has fallen, and all the cultivators in the array have lost contact. What? All of them lost contact? The people of Beast Master School and 10,000 Arts sect are still in the White Tiger Array. How could they lose contact so quickly? Report to Ancestor. According to the news from the front line, the crisis of the White Tiger Array is probably deliberately designed by the fallen immortals to lure us to send people there, and then catch them all in one fell swoop. Enough. The fallen immortals have set up such a big trap. Didn't the people of the Sky Evolution Group notice anything unusual in advance? I'll go and ask. A bunch of wastes. Report to Ancestor. Supreme Taoyuan of 10,000 Arts sect, who is in charge of the Sky Evolution Divine Calculation, has suffered a karma backlash. Now his mind is blinded, and he is no longer able to preside over the divine calculation. Karma backlash. That only hurt one person. The whole Sky Evolution Group, is there no one who can detect the problem in advance? Yes, the people of the Sky Evolution Group were completely deceived by the immortals. Every move was calculated by them. Without Supreme Tian Luan, it's really beyond our power to compete with the immortals. Patriarch, why didn't Feng Yin Daoist Master make a move? Feng Yin Daoist Master is in charge of the entire Cloud and Mist Array, and he also has to help Supreme Hichu mobilize the 9 regions Great Array. Occasionally, he even has to join the Immortal Killing Sword Array. He can't be distracted at all. You want him to go to the Sky Evolution Group? Are you going to be in charge of the Cloud and Mist Array? Yes, I misspoke. F***CK, are there any other elders in Heavenly Sage Hall who are good at calculating? You usually receive such a high amount of offerings, but now that the 9 regions are in a moment of life and death, can't you do anything? Patriarch, please calm down. At this moment, no one dares to be careless. It's just that, before True Monarch Peach Blossom, 3 true monarchs had already fallen in the Heaven Amplification Hall. If they continue to miscalculate like this, what's the use even if 300 people fall? Did they expect someone to confer upon them the title of martyr? Wait until all the people on the mountain are dead. There wouldn't even be anyone to collect their corpses. Tell the trash of the Heaven Evolution team that even if their primordial spirits explode, they have to hold on. Right now, the entire team on the front lines is dying, and they want to live peacefully at the back? What right do they have? Report. The pentagonal formation in the east has been completely nullified. Requesting permission to abandon the formation and shrink the defensive line. Pentagonal East formation? Shrink the defensive line? Bullshit. If we shrink any further, we will enter the inner ring. You want us to fight the fallen immortals in the inner ring. Why don't you just die? Tell them that even if they self-destruct their King Pill nascent soul, they have to hold on. I will mobilize the reserve troops to repair the position. Before that, no one is allowed to retreat even half a step. Do you understand? Report. For Division's Peak's vanguard was lost. The defending army was completely annihilated. Ancestor, how do you want to deal with it now? For Division's Peak. Didn't that mean that he had broken through the inner ring and was close to the core area? How could the fallen immortals break into the 4 Division's Peak? Wait, let me think, what about the Golden King? Didn't he claim that he would use Golden City to block all invading enemies? How could there be such a big mistake? Report. The Night King urgently asks for help. The Golden City is besieged by many immortals led by Senior Immortal Fengyun. The situation is critical. Your mother's fart. It's easy for me to sweep away evildoers, how could the situation be critical? I let them occupy half of the Golden City in order to enjoy this farce more. How dare you say that my situation is critical? You're really blind. Who told you to ask for help from them? Damn it, these bastards actually came again. Ancestor, looking at the Golden King, I'm afraid the situation is really critical. This Western continent barbarian who wants to save face is really unreasonable. But then again, who else can support him now? The new Red Guards? The Zaku army? Ancestor, those people have been scattered to, King know that they have been scattered to the 12 peaks of Spirit Sword Mountain. I don't need you to remind me. But now that most of the elite forces of 9 regions are concentrated in Spirit Sword Mountain, is there no one who can be used? Who can be used? Ancestor, when the raid on the Southern Heaven region failed, the army scattered and retreated, and many people were scattered in other places. After that, there was no time to gather them back to Spirit Sword Mountain. Right now, the communication channel on the mountain is still there. Should we ask them for help? Ask for help. Should we call the others to come and die? I'm afraid the fallen immortals have made such a big scene in order to let other people come and die like moths to a flame. But since the communication channel is still there, tell everyone in secret that if we want to help Spirit Sword Mountain, we have to besiege Wei to rescue Zhao, and go to the Southern Heaven region to break the inverse G-Saurus pillar. This is not a good idea, Ancestor, please think twice. Luli. You're finally back. Has the breach in the Spirit Pool Peak been blocked? I'm ashamed, the Immortals' means are really beyond my reach. A cloud-piercing thorn is stuck in the cloud and mist great array, and no matter what I do, I can't shake it. So, I have already broken the Spirit Pool Peak and blew up the gap with the power of self-destruction. Self-destruction of the Spirit Pool Peak? Hey, the elders of your Lingjian school are really bold. There's no other choice. Ancestor, I suggest that we don't let others act rashly now. My senior brother and I have just counted that the number of fallen immortals that appeared near Spirit Sword Mountain is only 2/3 of the total. Moreover, the most important immortal king has never appeared. The immortal world has left a hand. If there is no strong enough cultivator to lead them, I'm afraid that rashly going to the Southern Heaven region is exactly what they want. Then what do you think we should do? Now, we can only wait for Daoist Master Shifang to launch the Sky Tower again and try to bring back Wang Lu. Wang Lu. Yes, if that kid is still here, how could we fight like this? Cough, cough, cough. Ancestor, you should go down and rest for a while. You were injured by the broken god seal outside the Misty Peak just now. I'm afraid you'll leave some. It doesn't matter what kind of internal injury I have. If we lose this battle, the whole 9 regions will be gone. Can I, this old man, live alone? I've already thrown caution to the wind. A little injury from the broken god's seal is nothing. Luli kid, don't worry about me, go support Shifang and launch the Sky Tower. As long as Wang Lu can come back, the death of the people in front will be meaningful. Yes, Ancestor. Report. Senior Immortal Xiaoyao made his move. Golden King was defeated, and the Golden City has been destroyed in the Clear Sky Peak. What? Golden King was defeated? So fast? What happened to the Clear Sky Peak now? Report to Ancestor, it has been put into the Mustard Seed Summer space by Feng Yin Daoist Master, and suppressed together with Senior Immortal Xiaoyao under the Spirit Sword Mountain. But I'm afraid it won't last long. Report to Ancestor. Supreme Hichu's death to Immortal Sword Array is about to be broken. Xiang Liang, who was holding the Extinguish Immortal Sword, was seriously injured by Senior Immortal Qing Lu, and the Extinguish Immortal Sword is missing. The Extinguish Immortal Sword is lost. What are the people of Royal Soldier Sect doing? Pass my order, go to the Kuei Wood Array outside the Xiaoyao Peak and call Luli to replace Xiang Liang. She has the brilliant sword heart, so she should be able to find the Extinguish Immortal Sword in the chaos. But, only the Immortal Beast combination of Spirit Sword Mountain is left in the Kuei Wood Array. With only 2 young Immortal Beasts, I'm afraid, don't worry about those 2. One is the descendant of the Mountain Spirit, and the other is the descendant of the Demonic Wolf. Their survival ability in Spirit Sword Mountain is first class. Tell them to detonate the Kuei Wood Array at the critical moment, even if they have to pierce through the flank of the Clear Sky Peak. If it doesn't work, cut down the clear sky peak from the entire inner ring. In that case, the power of the cloud and mist great array will be greatly weakened. Right now, human life is more important than the array. Even if the cloud and mist great array is broken, as long as the 9 regions great array is still there, and we can still get the support of all the cultivators in the world, we can still hold on for a while. Remember, our goal is not to defeat the fallen immortals with the resources at hand. We just need to hold on until Wang Lu comes back. But just now, there's news from the stellar peak that the Sky Tower has been launched, but Wang Lu still can't come back. Still can't come back? Why? According to Taoist Master Shi Feng, the space barrier between the 2 worlds has been reinforced, and Wang Lu can't pass through it at all now. Then increase the output of the Sky Tower and make a hole in the barrier. If the output is not enough, then use human life to fill it. How can the blood sacrifice of a few Yuanying and deity stage cultivators increase the output of the Sky Tower several times? What? Blood sacrifice, ancestor, this is. I know it's an evil method. I also know that there are a lot of big devils who are absolutely irreconcilable with us on the front line right now. This is a battle of life and death. As long as we can win, we won't hesitate to pay any price. Pay any price, just to bring back Wang Lu? Listen, the current situation is that the array is more important than resources, human life is more important than the array, and Wang Lu is more important than anyone else. As long as he can come back, it's worth sacrificing anyone. If you don't want to, then this old man will take the lead. Absolutely not. Ancestor, you are now in charge of the overall situation, there must be no mistakes. I know, I'll convey your order right now. Wang Lu, we have reached the limit here. When are you going to come back? Chapter 832. Wang Lu, are you okay? I think you really can't hold on anymore. No. Then hurry up. The cloud array is about to be completely broken. The last outer ring array is gone, and now there's only a broken inner ring left. I know. I can see it. If you can see it, what are you waiting for? The Tower of Babel has opened the space barrier so big, can't you get through? You're fatter than a pig. Hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. Don't talk nonsense. If I could get through, I would have done it long ago. Is it fun to stay here? Do I look like I'm playing? Although the Tower of Babel has broken the space barrier, this hole is not enough to pass through at all. Forcibly crossing through is equivalent to cutting yourself like a stick. Moreover, the fallen immortals have been using immortal methods to strengthen the barrier. Don't you see that this passage is crumbling? Do you want the 2 of us to be banished to the endless void during the passage? Then what do you think we should do? It was you who asked them to desperately build this Tower of Babel. They pinned all their hopes on this tower, and so many people died for it. Now you're telling them that you can't do it, that you can't do it? Are you still a man? Wang Wu, shut the F***ck up. If you can't help, then stop talking nonsense. Don't I know that the situation is critical? Would I deliberately let them die in vain? The Tower of Babel pierced through the barrier and led me back to 9 regions. This is the method that you and I worked out together. Tell me what's wrong with this method. You've checked it more than a dozen times, have you made any mistakes? I'm not good at calculation, okay. Even my most astute doppelganger can barely be considered to know how to calculate. I've done my best to help you with your calculations, but now you're going to push the blame to me? I'm telling you, since you're illiterate and don't understand anything, just shut up and don't talk like an idiot. Our calculation is not wrong. If they can build a complete Tower of Babel, they can open a complete passage for you and me to pass through in an instant. However, the power of this tower is only half of the plan, which is not enough. You want to blame them for not doing well enough? Most of them didn't even have their lives. I have no intention of blaming anyone. They have already done their best. In order to build this Tower of Babel, they did not hesitate to march into the heavenly south. They were even braver than I expected. But regrettably, everyone, including me, was tricked by someone else on this point. The reverse Gisaurus pillar sample that they sacrificed countless people to obtain was actually a fake. What? Senior Immortal Xiaoyao, or someone else, had already expected our real purpose when the elites of 9 regions were all raised, but they didn't make it public. On the one hand, they sent the immortals to meet the enemy head-on on the battlefield. On the other hand, they deliberately exposed flaws, so that Yin Xian and the others had a chance to succeed and sacrifice their lives to cut off the fragments from the reverse Gisaurus pillar. But the reverse Gisaurus pillar had already been swapped out, right? Perhaps it was a switch, or perhaps Yin Xian and the others were toyed with by the celestial sovereign. But no matter what the reason is, the final result is the same. The Tower of Babel built on fake materials cannot be compared to the original. The fact that we're able to produce half of the expected output is already an exceptional performance from Lu Li. How much difference can there be between half power and full power? It's a qualitative difference. A full power Tower of Babel can completely break through a passage. But at half power, I need to cooperate with the Tower of Babel at the same time. But my strength is far from enough. Do you remember the calculation I made at the beginning? If I want to open the passage with my own strength, I need to be at least 10 times stronger than now and push the synchronization rate of the giant divine weapon to 120%. Now that I have a half-power Tower of Babel, I only need to be 5 times stronger to support a stable passage back to 9 regions. But that also means that I need to improve the synchronization rate to a perfect level. And that takes hundreds of years, so, even if you urge me, it's useless. I've just tried to burn my life to double my strength. But as you can see, there's almost no difference in the passage. That is to say, we can't go back at all now. It's not impossible to forcibly cross the passage, but just like Kanglan who came to 9 regions, 90% of your ability is gone. Even if you go back, what can you do? Hichu and the others are pinning their hopes on the savior Wang Lu, not the weak chicken Wang Lu. Either we don't go back, or we have to make the final decision. But now, the Spirit Sword Mountain is about to be captured. Once the mountain gate falls, the forces gathered by the union of 10,000 immortals in the mountain will be completely wiped out. At that time, how can you and I make the final decision? I know, you don't need to say this kind of thing. Let me go, I'll try again. Enough, burning life is not a panacea. Even if you burn the remaining hundreds or thousands of years of life, it's impossible to suddenly become 5 or 10 times stronger. Wang Lu, use me, refine me, and in a short time, your strength should skyrocket several times. Don't talk nonsense. You're the one who doesn't talk nonsense. Now, what else can we do besides this trick? Anything is fine, but this trick is absolutely not fine. Why not? For the sake of 9 regions, haven't you sacrificed a lot of people? When you asked them to build the Tower of Babel, did you really not think of what they would do? In the Battle of the Southern Heaven region, plus the attack and defense of Spirit Sword Mountain, even 1/3 of the people of Lingjian's school died. The errand boy who accompanied you up the mountain was beheaded. Yu Yun, who took you on your first trip to the small clear sky peak, also had his hands crippled. These are the people around you. You've always understood the principle of not being merciful in command of an army better than me. How come now you're being soft-hearted? You can say that I'm soft-hearted, that I'm not merciful in command of an army. Anyone else can die, but you can't die. I'm no more special than anyone else. I should have died 200 years ago. I've lived for so long, and I've had enough. I've tasted enough of watching the people close to me die. If you want me to stay here and watch the 9 regions be wiped out by the fallen immortals, you might as well kill me immediately. What about me? Haven't I experienced the tragedy of that year? Am I so heartless that I don't feel pain? Did I cross the world to return to 9 regions just to watch my beloved woman die? Wang Wu, there's no need to say that nonsense. Even if I really refine you, if I return to 9 regions alone, what can I do? You and I are one, and it's incomplete without either side. 9 regions doesn't need a broken Wang Lu. But, your ultimate non-phase method is about to be perfected, and then it will form an impregnable fortress, which is an indispensable part of the plan. So, don't say anything stupid about sacrificing yourself. If you really want to help, just be quiet. Wang Lu, the inner circle array of Spirit Sword Mountain has been broken. I know. The Clear Sky Peak has been abandoned, and the Four Divisions Peak has also been lost. I can see it. Oh, even the non-phase peak has been killed. But the mechanism you made in the mountain came in handy and took away an immortal. Cannon fodder immortal is insignificant. Now they are besieging the Misty Peak. The junior brothers and sisters of Heavenly Sword Hall are already fighting in the front line. Hua Yun is injured. I know. Senior brother Lu Xian is in danger. Fortunately, he escaped at the critical moment, but his primordial spirit is seriously injured, I'm afraid. I know. You don't have to broadcast the battle report to me. I can see it clearly. I can see every fellow Daoist who sacrificed themselves. Including those innocent civilians in Spirit Creek Town, including our friends who used to talk and laugh with us. I'm helplessly watching them die in battle, helplessly watching the 9 regions slide into the abyss, but I have no other choice now. No. So, don't say any more. The current situation is already. What's wrong? The synchronization rate of the giant divine weapon seems to be, Senior Immortal Xiaoyao, the Misty Peak is about to attack. Although they have retreated step by step and left many people on the stellar peak, they have no chance. Well, you did a good job. I will report to His Majesty the Immortal King later. Then, thank you for your kind words. Speaking of which, this battle is really easy and simple. After all, the lower realm bastards are bastards. Well, I see. You can go now. Yes. Humph, easy and simple. It is indeed easy and simple. Without you, there would be no suspense in this game. However, at this point, you still haven't come to your senses. You have disappointed me a little. Driving the giant divine weapon and synchronizing with sun booping, the most important part of this is the sense of despair of watching your comrades die but unable to do anything about it. Sun booping is disheartened in his later years, and the sense of despair has long been deeply rooted. If you can't experience this step, you will never be able to truly synchronize with him. And I have set the stage so well, you can't really be so clumsy that you can't feel anything, right? Reporting to Senior Immortal. The Immortal World sent a message saying that the passage between the 2 worlds and the space barrier of 9 regions seems to have been broken through. Chapter 833. Blue River Region, Spirit Sword Mountain. The siege of the fallen immortals had lasted for the 10th day. Prior to this, no one had imagined that Spirit Sword Mountain could persist for so long. In the face of the joint siege of dozens of immortals and many senior immortals, it was a miracle that a sect in the lower realm could persist for half a day. And this miracle happened 20 times in the end. Admittedly, this was more or less due to Senior Immortal Xiaoyao. If he hadn't asked Feng Yun and the others to slow down and disperse the power of the immortals, the mountain protection array of Spirit Sword Mountain would definitely not be able to support the full outbreak of the immortals. However, the real miracle creator was 9 regions, including both this land and the people on it. In the past 10 days, Spirit Sword Mountain had experienced countless life and death situations, and the stubborn cultivators had erupted with amazing cohesion. All the former enmity had been put down, and everyone was united to fight for survival. On the battlefield, one could see the demon-slaying guards fighting side by side with the great devil who had slaughtered thousands of people. One could see the treatment team of Kunlun Immortal Mountain doing their best to treat the rogue cultivators who had betrayed the sect. One could also see that the 5 super sects had made their own methods public so that others could learn from them. This was like the great unity of the world, which had never been realized even in the 15 years of Wang Lu's rule of 9 regions. However, in the past 10 days, it had really happened. People could not help but sigh with emotion that it seemed that only when the end of the world came could they see the great sublimation of morality. However, it seemed that it was too late to sharpen the spear just before the battle. For an immortal-level method like Stellar Sword Method, 10 days was not enough to even read it once, let alone learn from it. The tension of the frontline battle made the seriously injured cultivators often unable to leave the battlefield. There was no time for them to meditate and comprehend. However, at this time, the deepest engraving of the great array of 9 regions was activated by chance. Thus, the continent suddenly seemed to have awakened its own consciousness and began to save itself at all costs. On the one hand, 9 regions cut off the connection with the immortals, so that the immortals could no longer easily control the providence of 9 regions. On the other hand, 9 regions completely abandoned the principle of equivalent exchange and began to bless its own cultivators at all costs. In the past, the children of destiny would only appear once every few hundred or even 1,000 years, yet they were popping up like bamboo shoots after the rain. The cultivators of 9 regions found that they could repeatedly make breakthroughs in life and death situations. Not to mention those who were stuck at the peak stage, even many middle-level king pill cultivators became Yuanying stage cultivators. There were even some who broke through from the king pill realm all the way to the peak of the soul formation realm within 3 days. Although this realm was superficial and there were many hidden dangers, the speed of their progress was so fast that even great ancestor Desheng and immortal Qin couldn't compare. With the combination of various factors, Spirit Sword Mountain finally survived to the 10th day under the indiscriminate bombardment of the immortals. Then, the situation of the battle finally reached an irreversible state of decay. More than half of the 12 peaks of Spirit Sword Mountain fell. Carefree Peak, Stellar Peak, Sword Tomb. Together, they formed the last line of defense. However, in the end, it was just a deathbed struggle, an arrow at the end of its flight. The elite forces of the Wanxian League that gathered in the mountains suffered heavy casualties. The new Red Guards were almost completely wiped out. The remaining Dixian people were all killed except for a few. The reinforcements from the western continent were trapped in the wreckage of the Clear Sky Peak. Golden King himself was seriously injured and unconscious. Aya's stubborn resistance had also lost the possibility of a breakthrough. The Death to Immortal Sword Array was personally broken twice by Senior Immortal Xiaoyao. 2 of the 4 immortal swords were broken, and Supreme Hichu, who presided over the array, was directly knocked down from Mahayana stage to Yuanying stage. Even the 9 regions map was almost taken away. The Zaku army of the Red Sea Underwater Workshop was in a slightly better condition. After Golden King was seriously injured, the 9-tailed fox took over the baton. The fox was cunning and astute, and she was once a servant of the immortal world. She knew herself and the enemy well. She successfully killed 3 or 4 immortals and even wounded Senior Immortal Lifeng, achieving one of the biggest results since the start of the war. However, under the huge gap in strength, the Zaku army was powerless to reverse the situation. More than half of the Zaku army were destroyed, and the main force, Xiang Liang and Qianghua, were seriously injured. The 9-tailed fox had to give up the initiative to attack and retreated behind the final line of defense. At this point, Spirit Sword Mountain no longer had the power to fight. There was only a group of people who were waiting for death, hiding behind the crumbling line of defense and pinning their final hope on the tower. Can Wang Lu come back or not? 5 days ago, when the situation of the battle took a turn for the worse, the Stellar Peak lost contact with Wang Lu. No matter how they called, there was no response. The passage opened by the Heavenly Tower was still there, and the passage between the 2 worlds had not disappeared, but there was no sound from it anymore. This was simply bad news. Therefore, except for a few people, the news was strictly kept secret from everyone else. However, when everyone was concentrated on the Stellar Peak, the so-called secrecy was just self-deception. On the other side, the mood of the immortals was not good either. They had thought that it would be a one-sided massacre, but in the end, the lowly beings of the lower realm had held on for 10 days, and they had even launched several sharp counterattacks, causing considerable casualties. More than 10 immortals had died in battle, and the rest were injured. Among the senior immortals, Lifeng was the most seriously injured. It could be said that he had lost 500 years of cultivation base. Senior Immortal Fengyan was too fierce. Although he was not physically injured, his immortal path's law had been figured out. It could be said that he had suffered a big loss. Such a result was simply a serious blow to the immortal world, which was already declining in population. There were not many immortals alive today, so they really could not afford such a loss. In the final analysis, naturally, no one was willing to admit that the people of 9 regions were too strong and could already challenge the immortals. Thus, it could only be attributed to the poor command of the battle. The first to attack was senior immortal Fengyun, the most unruly person among the senior immortals. Finally, he could fire at Xiaoyao without any scruples. I've long said that to deal with these bastards, we should use the power of thunder. They're like a pile of **T. The longer we tangle with them, the more dirty our hands are. Why do you want to spread panic and despair to tie people's hands and feet? As a result, it's all our own people who are hurt. That's interesting. We don't need them as captives. What's the use of panic and despair of a group of people who are going to die? Can it make us happy? When we fought in the world, what haven't we seen? Do we still need this kind of porridge and side dishes to spice things up? Did His Majesty the Immortal King say to fight like this? Xiaoyao, what exactly do you want to do? Senior Immortal Fengyun's words aroused the same feeling from many people. Others would not be like Fengyun, who would recklessly scold him, but they also looked forward to how Xiaoyao would answer. What I want to do has nothing to do with you. Senior Immortal Xiaoyao was still calm and collected. There was no trace of wavering on his handsome face. I'm not obliged to explain to you what I'm doing. You. Fengyun was furious, but he had no way to refute it. Senior Immortal Xiaoyao was ranked first among the senior immortals, a respected figure under only one person in the immortal world. He was deeply trusted by the Immortal King and was only responsible to the Immortal King. No matter how absurd the things he did, there was no need to explain it to others. So, do you have the obligation to explain it to me? Xiaoyao. At this moment, the complexion of everyone present changed in an instant. Even Xiaoyao couldn't restrain himself and stood up. Immortal King. Your Majesty. At this time, it was not the Immortal King's body that appeared, but only his voice. However, even if the Immortal King only had his voice, it could not be ignored. Xiaoyao, come to see me in the Palace of 3 Purities. Senior Immortal Xiaoyao hesitated for a moment and said, Your Majesty, the situation here is not completely clear. I'm afraid it's not appropriate for me to go far. Not completely clear? Those bastards only have their last breath left. What's not clear about the situation? Your Majesty, humph, I think you want the situation to be more confusing. If it weren't for your wanton behavior, how could it take so much time for this group of bastards to be solved? The words of the Immortal King made Senior Immortal Fengyun's eyes lit up. However, no matter how unruly he was, at this time, the Immortal King was talking to Xiaoyao, so he never dared to interrupt halfway. Senior Immortal Xiaoyao was silent for a moment and said, Your Majesty, I can swear that I have never done anything that harms the interests of the immortal world. My arrangement in Spirit Sword Mountain is not for my own selfish interest. Of course I know that you're not doing it for your own selfish interest. And although there are many doubtful points in your actions, they are indeed for the great plan of the immortal world. If not, how could I allow you to live until now? Senior Immortal Xiaoyao said, Your Majesty, please understand. So, I'll give you a chance to come to the Palace of 3 Purities and explain all this to me. Senior Immortal Xiaoyao pondered for a moment and hesitated. Of course, he didn't want to go to the Palace of 3 Purities, but how could he disobey the order of the Immortal King? In fact, with Xia Yu's temper, even if you had a reasonable explanation, once you disobeyed his order, it would still be a dead end. So, just as Xiaoyao was about to open his mouth to agree to this matter, suddenly, a mechanism placed in a distant place was triggered. A strange smile appeared on Senior Immortal Xiaoyao's face. Your Majesty, I'm sorry. I can't comply. Very well, then I'll come to you. The next moment, the sky of 9 regions was torn apart. A burly figure, in the distortion of light and shadow, slowly descended on 9 regions. The real body of the immortal King Xiaoyu finally arrived. Chapter 834. Since ancient times, it has been said in 9 regions that when the immortals descended to the lower realm, there must be a vision. In the age of desolation, the immortals in the lower realm were often accompanied by thousands of miles of colorful clouds and golden light. The shrouded place was filled with intoxicating fragrance, and there were invisible drums and flutes playing the sounds of nature. Its grandeur and magnificence were as if the 9 regions was welcoming the traveler who returned home with the grandest courtesy. Compared with the high and mighty immortal world, the 9 regions was just a starting point. Cultivators cultivated here and comprehended the truth of heaven and earth. Once they achieved something, they would break through the sky and enter a new world. Since the birth of the civilization of the 9 regions, there have been many cultivators who have succeeded in their cultivation over the countless years, but only a few of them were willing to return. It was reasonable for the 9 regions to treat these immortals who returned home in glory with courtesy. However, it turned out that the stories passed down from ancient times were not necessarily true. Since Mr. Feng Yu came to the lower realm, the number of immortals who came to 9 regions had been more than 100, but how could there be any vision between heaven and earth? In fact, how could the 9 regions have a good face for this group of immortals who were determined to destroy the 9 regions? The so-called vision that was passed down from ancient times was mostly those vain immortals playing and singing with immortal method. Until this time. The Supreme of the immortal world tore the wall of space and slowly descended from the sky of the Blue River region. At this moment, the dark and tumbling clouds suddenly condensed, and the lightning arcs that lingered in the clouds no longer jumped. Even the astral wind in the sky stopped whistling and became silent. The space solidified, as if time no longer flowed. When the immortal king descended, there was no gorgeous and magnificent immortal aura, only a heavy pressure that fell on the hearts of the people. This was a rare vision in the 9 regions in 10,000 years. The continent did not show any welcome etiquette, but it clearly showed its own fear. The 9 regions was afraid of the arrival of the immortal king. At the same time, the immortals around the stellar peak stopped their movements and looked up at the figure of the immortal king. Then, from Xiaoyao, Lifeng, Qinglu, Fengyun, all the senior immortals and immortals bowed down one by one to show their allegiance to the immortal king. They even completely forgot that they were on the battlefield and that there were a large number of enemies not far in front of them. However, the cultivators of the Wanxian League had no time to fight back, because their bodies were heavier than ever. And the magical power in their jade mansion tended to condense. Let alone fight back, it was very difficult to even maintain their own method. And all of this was because an uninvited guest had come to the 9 states. The immortal king of immortal King Xiaoyu. Even the most spirited of cultivators felt despair in their hearts at this moment. Even if the 9 regions had the 4 powers, at iming immortals of the immortals, the world, the regions, the imed king in world, realm, 9 regions, of, king Imals, even if the world, of the 9 of Imals, could have the of im of the of however, after the arrival of the immortal king Xiaoyu, he did not get rid of the spirit sword mountain. His attention was only focused on one person. Xiaoyao, do you want me to walk over to see you? Senior immortal Xiaoyao smiled bitterly and nodded. Then, his figure turned into a rainbow light and flashed to the distant 9th heaven in front of Xiaoyu. At this point, the 2 immortals faced each other, less than 3 feet apart. Except for Xiaoyao, no immortal had ever been so close to the immortal king. Xiaoyao, why did you betray me? In the immortal world, senior immortal Xiaoyao was the closest to the immortal king. However, while he enjoyed the respect, he would also be subject to extremely strict restrictions. Xiaoyu never gave his subordinates unconditional trust. When he gave senior immortal Xiaoyao the authority, he also left a mark on him. Once there was a trace of disobedience and betrayal in senior immortal Xiaoyao's heart, the immortal king would know. After senior immortal Xiaoyao descended to the lower realm, his every move was naturally seen by Xiaoyu. Then, the immortal king strangely found that Xiaoyao's behavior was completely unreasonable. It was as if he deliberately allowed the people of 9 regions to linger on. This was completely contrary to the purpose of the Great Purge plan. There was not much time left in the immortal world. If the 9 regions could not be cleaned up as soon as possible and refined as a sacrifice, then everything would be over. Senior Immortal Xiaoyao delaying time at this time was already an out-and-out traitor behavior. However, at the same time, Xia Yu did not feel any betrayal from Xiaoyao at all. He was still loyal to the immortal world and never disobeyed his instructions. In that case, how could all this be explained? Thus, he summoned Xiaoyao and asked him to return to the Palace of 3 Purities to explain everything. Unexpectedly, Xiaoyao suddenly refused him and disobeyed his order. This was an obvious sign of rebellion. Xiaoyao actually betrayed him? The surprise in Xia Yu's heart was indescribable. For this reason, he did not hesitate to drag his injured immortal body to 9 regions to find out. Your Majesty the Immortal King, I have never betrayed anyone. Senior Immortal Xiaoyao took a deep breath and said frankly, I swore allegiance to the immortal world, not to anyone in the immortal world. What a joke, do you want to say that my existence hinders the interests of the immortal world? Your Majesty, forgive me for asking you a question. How long have you lived? The immortal King Xia Yu's heart turned cold. What do you know? The confrontation between the immortal king and senior immortal Xiaoyao took place above the 9th heaven. While the 2 sides were talking, the remaining soldiers in Spirit Sword Mountain also got a little breathing room. When the immortal king focused his attention on Xiaoyao, the oppressive force that deterred the entire realm also disappeared. People were finally able to breathe and move freely, but in despair, no one could raise any fighting spirit. Only a small number of people could maintain their immortal heart in a desperate situation. On the stellar peak, Luli blinked her eyes and asked curiously, what are they doing? Not far from Luli, Heavenly Fox shook her burnt 9 tails in boredom and said, those 2 people? Of course, they're talking. Could it be a blind date? Alas, Your Majesty the Immortal King actually came forward in person. This time, we really have no chance to sing. Is the Immortal King that powerful? Zhu Shiyao's eyes lit up and she was eager to try. The fox girl was going crazy. I say, that's enough. Just now, your 2 hands were broken, and you were finally saved by that black ghost, yet you still want to fight? Moreover, can't you see how big the gap between you and the Immortal King is? Let alone you, who has an inferior body, even if Wang Lu himself comes back, he can't be the opponent of the Immortal King. That giant divine weapon is at most at the level of Senior Immortal Xiaoyao, there's no way we can fight it. Since the Immortal King is so strong, it would be a pity if we can't fight it and verify our swordsmanship. Oh, it's hard for you to say a complete sentence. It seems that breaking through to deity stage is still helpful to your IQ. But save it as soon as possible. That's not the way to die. With that, the fox girl suppressed Zhu Shiyao's request with a tough attitude. Stay here honestly. Even if we are going to die, we have to fight for as much time as possible to survive, even if it's just one more breath. Life is very precious. Then, the fox girl raised her head and looked at the highest point of the stellar peak at this time, the tower that had broken through the space barrier. Wang Lu, can you come back or not? Little Ling, air. I really want to see you. On the stellar peak, in a simple pharmacy, Elder Guanhai carefully covered a layer of ointment on the broken arm of the wounded person in front of him. He saw that there were countless black gas on the cross-section, but when it was touched by the ointment, it melted like snow and disappeared without a trace. Junior brother Zhangsheng, do you feel better? Well, there's no problem anymore. Senior brother really uses medicine like a god. The wounded person shrugged and showed a bright smile on his face. It seems that I can still fight a few more times. Lu, put on my armor. Zhangsheng said as he used his remaining hand to put on a layer of immortal armor. Elder Guanhai was surprised. You still want to fight? As long as I'm alive, of course, I have to fight. Senior brother, you don't have to worry about me. My life has long been scheduled to end on the battlefield, and this time, it's a worthy death. Moreover, with Lu accompanying me, I won't be lonely. Oh, that's not right. It should be said that this time, everyone will come to accompany me. Don't let third brother hear that. Ha ha ha, third brother is an old-fashioned guy. He was obviously not like this before. In a remote corner, Zhou Mumu reclined under a towering tree in a daze. Master. This disciple is unfilial and will soon see you. Well, it's a pity that in the end, we still lost this war, and the 9 regions couldn't be saved. However, Master, your heroic fighting posture has indeed been imprinted in everyone's mind. No one will ever laugh at our Kunlun immortal sect for having an empty history but no responsibility. What are you doing? When Zhou Mumu heard this voice, she stood up in a panic and said, Zhanzai? What are you doing here? Moreover, where's your agent who is responsible for guiding your words and deeds? At this time, what do I need an agent for? Do I still need to care about whether my EQ is high or not, and whether I can make friends or not? Moreover, she's already dead. Zhou Mumu slightly lowered her head and said, Oh. What a pity. Everyone is going to die anyway. Zhanzai shook his head, and the wound began to ooze blood again. So, I have something to say to you. Look for me. Do you have something to say? Zhanzai took a deep breath and made the boldest decision in his life. Senior brother, the line of defense has been rebuilt. Lu Li cupped his hands toward the old man in the bamboo room. In the middle of the room, the old man with the vicissitudes of life slowly nodded. Compared with not long ago, Feng Yin looked even older. With his current peak deity stage strength, his actual fighting power surpassed Dixian's strength, and his lifespan should be extremely long, but at this time, he looked old. Senior brother, Wang Lu, Feng Yin said, Wang Lu has done everything he can do. We are too dependent on him. I see. So, does the Sky Tower need to be closed? No need, just keep it open like that. Feng Yin said, although I know all this is just an extravagant hope, I always feel that eldest senior brother will never abandon us. In the most critical time, he will definitely come forward. Lu Li said, Senior brother, please don't belittle yourself. After eldest senior brother Ouyang Shang died, it was you who led Lingjian's school out of the mire. And every time I encounter a difficult situation, I will think of eldest senior brother in my heart, and then I will be motivated to persevere. Feng Yin sighed and said, and now, I can't help but start to miss him. I think he should come back. Well, maybe. Lu Li shook his head indifferently and was about to leave. However, the moment he turned around, he suddenly saw a familiar figure outside the bamboo room. The next moment, Lu Li's eyes widened and his mouth opened wide. An indescribable surge of emotions filled his heart. Chapter 835. Xiaoyao, is this the reason why you betrayed me? If your majesty must think that this is a betrayal, I have nothing to say. However, you should understand who was the first to betray the immortal world from being the head of all the worlds in the past to its current situation. The current immortal world is still the head of all the worlds. Yes, the immortal world has been at war for many years, destroying all the worlds and dominating the ruins. Your majesty, when you ascended the throne, you didn't promise us that. Above the 9th heaven, the conversation between the immortal king Xia Yu and Xiaoyao continued. For thousands of years, Xia Yu had lived in the palace of 3 purities. Except for senior immortal Xiaoyao, no one had ever had such a long conversation with him. Xia Yu always had unusual patience and tolerance for Xiaoyao. Even today, when senior immortal Xiaoyao had unabashedly admitted his betrayal of the immortal king, this patience was still not exhausted. Xia Yu looked at Xiaoyao with a complicated look and said, Xiaoyao, how long have you lived? Senior immortal Xiaoyao said, 13,500 years. In the immortal world, I am relatively young. Thanks to your majesty's appreciation, I can have today's achievements, but, before he could finish, he was interrupted by Xia Yu. Do you know how long I have lived? Senior immortal Xiaoyao pondered for a moment. He had long suspected this question, and at the same time, he also had his own speculation. Your Majesty ascended the throne of the immortal king 30,000 years ago. If we calculate this, I have lived for 100,000 years. What? Although senior immortal Xiaoyao had long suspected the lifespan of the immortal king Xiaoyu, he was surprised to hear the answer from the immortal king himself. This was much longer than he expected, and it had already exceeded common sense. Immortals were not really immortal. Generally speaking, the average immortal, that was, the level of true immortal, could live for 10,000 years. In 9 regions, they were the giants of all ages. At the level of senior immortal, their lifespan could be extended to 20,000 years. As for the immortal king, except for Xiaoyu, only a few people in the history of the immortal world had reached this realm. According to the records of the predecessors, the lifespan of the immortal king was 50,000 years. By special means, it could be extended to 60 to 70,000 years, and it was impossible to live any longer. Everyone would eventually die. This was the supreme law that encompassed all worlds, and no life form could escape from it. The more one defied the heavens, the heavier the restrictions of the laws would be. If one wanted to prolong their time, they would have to put in a lot of effort. Before Xiaoyu, there was once an immortal king who pursued longevity at all costs, but in the end, he fell on his 75,000th birthday. He used all the resources of the entire immortal world and gave it his all, but the result was nothing more than extending his lifespan by 5,000 years. Yet, Xiaoyu said that he had lived for 100,000 years. Just how much did he have to pay to achieve this? It was simply unimaginable. No, it wasn't that hard to imagine. The world of immortals had gone from being the supreme ruler of all worlds to a lone island in the middle of ruins. Tens of thousands of immortals had either died in the fires of war or had died due to the changes in the laws of the world when it was in decline. Even the once vast and boundless world of immortals had split into countless fragments. At first, people had thought that this was a natural change in the laws of the world. It was similar to how the people of 9 regions treated the Age of Chaos. But now it seemed that the Age of Chaos in 9 regions originated from the plundering of 9 regions by the immortal world. The destruction of the immortal world was clearly the price Xiaoyu had to pay for his 100,000 years of life. Your Majesty, for the sake of your own selfishness, can you even ignore the immortal world? Immortal cultivation is for one's own selfishness. Xiaoyu said unceremoniously, otherwise, what's the purpose of immortal cultivation? Wine, women, avarice, and temper? Power over the world? In that case, why do you need to ascend to the immortal world? You can be like a fish in water in 9 regions. The essence of immortal cultivation is to seek longevity. There is great horror between life and death. It is this horror that drives generations of cultivators to explore the immortal path. You should understand this truth. But what's the point of this kind of struggling at death's door? Xiaoyu said, you have only lived for 10,000 years, so naturally, you are far from experiencing the wonderful taste of longevity. When you live for 100,000 years like me, you can naturally understand the feeling of longevity. Indeed, for the current me, every day I live has to pay an amazing price, but at the same time, I will also get amazing pleasure. Equivalent exchange, this is also the supreme law in the world. I see. Maybe your Majesty really has your own reasons. But please forgive me for not agreeing with it. Senior Immortal Xiaoyao said seriously, like I said, I am loyal to the immortal world, not to your Majesty the immortal king. Your Majesty destroyed the immortal world for his own selfishness. Xiaoyu said, so, what if I say I will share longevity with you? Xiaoyao was surprised and said, share longevity with me? Why? As a senior immortal in the immortal world, Xiaoyao knew very well that there were many things that could not be shared by a king. Xiaoyu attached so much importance to longevity that he wished he could use all the resources in the world in exchange for the extension of life. How could such a person share longevity with others? Unless, the next moment, Xiaoyu solved the mystery. It could be said that it was not unexpected. Because you are my child. Xiaoyu said, your mother is a great cultivator, but unfortunately, I can't give her a proper title. That's why I've never told anyone about your identity. However, among my many children, only you have truly inherited my mantle. Like Xia Xiaohe, she is just a fool who used the name of the immortal king's daughter to act recklessly. Her death is not worth pitying. Senior Immortal Xiaoyao found it difficult to calm down. He had thousands of words to say, but he didn't know where to start. His path in the immortal world was too smooth. The immortal king Xia Yu was almost obedient to him. Many people joked that he was the illegitimate son of the immortal king, which deeply violated his taboo. But unexpectedly, the joking words of the past turned out to be true. He was really the son of the immortal king. However, even if I'm your child, for you, I'm just a relatively high-level sacrifice. In order to live a long life, you can even ignore the whole immortal world, let alone a mere son. No, you're wrong. Only you, I will not sacrifice in any case. Because you are the key to my longevity. Senior Immortal Xiaoyao was shocked again. Do you want to reincarnate? Just like how you dealt with Xia Xiaohe and the others, you want to use my body to prolong your existence? No, my existence has pretty much come to an end. The immortal king Xia Yu sighed with desolation. In the past tens of thousands of years, I have exhausted all my means. The time limit of 100,000 years is my limit. Even if I clean up the 9 regions this time, it will not help me to continue to prolong my life. Then, I have done all this for you. After I die, you will inherit everything from me and become the new me. You should have heard the saying that children are the continuation of their parents' life. Senior Immortal Xiaoyao sneered, I don't want to continue your life. I am me, and I will never become anyone else. Xia Yu said with desolation, I have said this sentence of yours 70,000 years ago. Whether you admit it or not, you are almost a copy of me at that time. Xiaoyao, since you entered the immortal world, your every move has been under my control. What makes you think that you can really become an independent individual? Senior Immortal Xiaoyao was silent. Thinking of the care that the immortal king had given him in the past years, sweat gradually oozed from his forehead. So, including your rebellion, it's actually not unexpected to me. If it were me at that time, I would probably do the same thing. You want to delay time and let that lower realm bastard come back, but do you really think he can change anything? Senior Immortal Xiaoyao had nothing to say. He indeed had high expectations for Wang Lu. However, if all this had fallen into the immortal king's calculation, then his so-called expectations for Wang Lu were just a pipe dream. In the silence of Senior Immortal Xiaoyao, the immortal king suddenly raised his hand, and an invisible wave spread to the distance, silently breaking the connection between the heavenly tower of Stellar Peak and the wreckage of the passage between the 2 worlds. Now, he can't come back. However, at this moment, a playful laughter came in. What a pity, you too, I'm back. Chapter 836. Half an hour ago, in 9 regions, a long-lost figure appeared on the stellar peak. Luli wiped his eyes in disbelief, ignoring the fact that his pair of spirit eyes had long been comparable to that of an immortal, and there would be no hallucinations. The appearance of this person was simply too inconceivable, and it made one's heart surge. Lingjian School, Wanxian League, and even the entire 9 regions had been looking forward to his return for too long, so that most people even felt desperate about his return. In the midst of despair, hope quietly came. Wang Lu actually came back. Just when Lu Li couldn't help but exclaim, the young man outside the bamboo room turned his head and covered his mouth with his index finger, indicating that he should not make a sound. Then, a familiar voice sounded in Lu Li's mind. Don't make it public. Lu Li was stunned and asked, why? Feng Yin stood up and put his hand on Lu Li's shoulder and said, Big brother. No, since Wang Lu said that, he must have his intention. Don't you want to be discovered? Wang Lu nodded and said, I wanted to appear in an above-board manner, but since that guy is here. With that, he pointed to the immortal King Xia Yu in the sky behind him and said, then it's necessary to change the way of thinking. Feng Yin said through primordial spirit, the power of the immortal king is indeed too strong. There's no chance of winning in a head-on confrontation, but even if he wanted to do something unconventional, with such a huge gap in strength between the two sides, what tricks could he play? Of course, Feng Yin could see that Wang Lu was no longer the same as before. He didn't know what kind of adventure he had in the passage between the two worlds, but his strength was not inferior to that of senior immortal Xiaoyao, the strongest among the senior immortals. However, it was still too far away from Xia Yu's terrifying power that could freeze time and space with just a raise of his hand. After all, the giant divine weapon was just a work of diction. Even if the synchronization rate was pushed to 100%, it could not reach the realm of the immortal king. If Wang Lu could come back earlier and completely seal the passage between the immortal world and 9 regions, there might be a possibility of saving the situation, but now, I need you to do 2 things. Wang Lu said, first, everything is as usual. Don't let anyone know that I'm back. Second, give me the 9 regions map. The 9 provinces map has been damaged. Of course it will be damaged. The southern heaven region was destroyed by the reverse Gisaurus pillar. 9 regions has lost one of its continents, so it would be strange if the 9 regions map was not damaged. However, the damaged 9 regions map is still the 9 regions map. If you want to control the rest of the 8 regions in the Spirit Sword Mountain, you have to use the 9 regions map. Feng Yin frowned. He really couldn't figure out what was the point of Wang Lu's obsession with a damaged 9 regions map at this time, but since he said so, I'll go find he too later, but he too was seriously injured before, and now he's relying on the 9 regions map to prolong his life. I can't guarantee, Wang Lu smiled. That won't do. Next, I have to get the 9 provinces map. For me, the 9 provinces map is much more important than the river diagram itself. Feng Yin could not help but be stunned. The implication of Wang Lu's words was obviously that he would not hesitate to kill and seize the treasure, but, that was he too, the one who presided over the death to immortal sword array and made great contributions in successive battles. Moreover, it was thanks to Hichu Daoran that Wang Lu was able to jump from the lead disciple of Lingjian's school to the number 1 person in 9 regions during the grand competition. It could be said that although he too was not Wang Lu's guide on the immortal path, there was no doubt that he was indebted to him. But now, Wang Lu wanted to take away he too's life easily. Rationally, this was not unacceptable. How could the life of he too be compared with the overall situation of 9 regions? But Wang Lu's face also sank. Sect leader, I know that you have always been soft-hearted, but at this time, a woman's kindness will only make the sacrifice of the predecessors worthless. In order to avoid people's eyes and ears, I can't leave your bamboo courtyard now. Otherwise, I would have gone to get it myself. Don't let me take this unnecessary risk. Feng Yin sighed. I know. With a slightly heavy step, Feng Yin left his bamboo room. However, when he stepped out of the door, he suddenly looked back and asked, "Where is 5th junior sister?" Wang Lu smiled but did not answer. After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, Feng Yin returned to the bamboo room with a map that was more than half incomplete and handed it over to Wang Lu. He too, died very peacefully. He said that you will definitely lead the rest of the people to the end. Wang Lu was silent for a moment, and then a trace of compassion flashed in his eyes. I see. Next, please leave for a while. When I cast the spell, no one can be around. Of course, Feng Yin and Lu Li had countless questions to ask, but at this time, they had no choice but to leave. When he was alone, Wang Lu immediately unfolded the 9 regions map and pressed it with one hand. In a twinkling of an eye, countless lines from all over the world were linked to him. It was just that many of them were intermittent and looming. This was a sign that the 9 regions had become fragile. Although the reverse Gisaurus pillar seemed to have only destroyed the southern heaven region, the deeper level of destruction had undoubtedly spread to every corner of the 9 regions. At the same time, many functions of the damaged 9 regions map could not be activated. With a solemn look, Wang Lu let the immortal spirit in his body wander in the map, trying his best to repair the damage. Soon after, his brows relaxed and a smile appeared on his face. The most important thing was still there. The next moment, there was a bit more sadness in his heart. In the case that the whole 9 regions map was damaged, this thing was still intact, which was obviously the credit of Hichu Daoren. At first, he just mentioned it casually, but Hichu had been seriously building it for a long time. Don't worry, brother Hichu, I won't let your sacrifice be in vain. Wang Lu whispered to himself. Then, he integrated himself deeper into the 9 regions map. With the help of the magical ability of this map, his consciousness spread throughout the 9 regions and found the person who had been waiting for a long time. It was a group of gentle holy light, with a vague outline of a person, but without facial features. Faceless, long time no see. Yes, long time no see, my master. Faceless voice sounded a bit lost. Master, are you going to use the final plan? Yes, let our people get ready. In theory, they are always ready for the arrival of the Judgment Day, which is written in the doctrine. However, I'm afraid no one can imagine what the true face of the Judgment Day is. Wang Lu sneered and said, can't imagine. The fallen immortals are about to sink the entire 9 regions. If they can't think that the Judgment Day is coming, then their faith is too insincere. Well, don't talk nonsense, get ready to start. The group of light that constituted Faceless shook slightly, and then, in a cadenced tone, recited the words that had been prepared for a long time. It was a strange language that could not be described by any words. Every tone contained infinite meaning. With the recitation of Faceless, a stream of holy light lit up in the 9 regions, and then, along the hidden passage, like rivers flowing into the sea, gathered in one place, gathered in Wang Lu's hand. At first it was just a trivial ball of light, but soon, with the convergence of the stream of holy light, it began to expand rapidly. In the blink of an eye, Feng Yin's bamboo room was filled with holy light. Wang Lu frowned and squeezed the holy light in his hand to the size of a fist again. However, at this time, the light had shone a dazzling golden light, accompanied by blazing heat, like a small sun. The gathering of holy light continued. Along the 9 regions map, tens of millions of holy light surged. So much so that Wang Lu, the Lord of Holy Light, gradually could not suppress this energy. The mass of light in his palm changed from white to gold, from gold to blood, and finally turned into a mass of dark. The energy contained in it was so huge that it could be described as soul-stirring. If it broke out carelessly, even a senior immortal would find it difficult to escape death. Such a terrifying energy naturally did not come out of thin air. Wang Lu clenched the dark energy ball in his hand, and his ears seemed to ring with the wailing of hundreds of millions of people. The so-called Judgment Day. To put it bluntly, it was a grand blood sacrifice. In the name of the Sea of Holy Light, Wang Lu ignited the holy light in the body of every believer in 9 regions, and then gathered the burning energy in one place. Holy light religion had been spreading in 9 regions for a long time. With the help of Wisdom's sect, holy light was almost everywhere, and there were tens of billions of pious believers. Although most of these believers were just ordinary people, the simultaneous ignition of trillions of believers was enough to create a world-destroying miracle. Of course, the price was too tragic. With the launch of the Judgment Day by Wang Lu, hundreds of millions of believers on the continent fell down in a daze and lost their vitality forever. Among them were lovers, loving mothers, generous elders, and lively teenagers. Hundreds of millions of creatures, hundreds of millions of families, were turned into nothingness by Wang Lu. He had no doubt that if the sky had not been torn apart, there would have been countless heavenly tribulation lightning falling on his head at this time. However, all of this was necessary. Without the Judgment Day, it was impossible for the broken 9 regions to provide such a huge amount of energy in a short period of time, let alone support Wang Lu to activate the array hidden in the deepest part of the 9 regions map. It's easy to say that I have to carry the fate of the dead, but now I have no choice. If the immortal world succeeds, everyone will die. By sacrificing some people to save everyone, can I be regarded as a partner of justice? With a trace of self-deprecating smile, Wang Lu slowly pressed the black ball in his hand into the 9 regions map. The moment the figure of the light ball completely disappeared, this immortal treasure that carried the thousands of years of history of Xingjing's sect began to burn. In the fire, Wang Lu looked up, and his eyes had become firm. Very good, all the preparations are in place. Next, it's time to give the two people who are talking excitedly a surprise. The next moment, his figure flashed and appeared above the ninth heaven, facing Xia Yu and Xiaoyao head-on. Chapter 837. It's you? Xia Yu could not hide his surprise. Because no matter how he thought about it, at this moment, Wang Lu should not be here. He had personally confirmed the thickness of the space barrier between the two-world passage and the 9 regions. Even if the people of 9 regions imitated the Gisaurus pillar and broke through part of the barrier, in order to accommodate living people, the person at the other end of the passage must at least have the strength of a peak senior immortal. But how could that be possible? Without the purification of immortal spirit and the support of the immortal path laws of the immortal world, how could there be a peak senior immortal in 9 regions? An elephant could not be bred in an ant's nest, and a whale could not grow in a puddle. The limit of 9 regions had been confirmed by the first group of immortals who ascended to the immortal world millions of years ago. That was the most powerful and dreamlike era in 9 regions. Those who walked on the earth were all powerful people with magical abilities. The great beasts were born with the power to move mountains and fill the seas, and when they grew up, they were comparable to true immortals. Human beings were born with spirit root, and the path of immortal cultivation was smooth and unimpeded. At that time, there was no systematic immortal path. People explored the road ahead by their own ability. Some traveled thousands of miles in one go, while others struggled step by step. After hundreds of thousands of years of exploration and accumulation, someone finally found the most spacious path of immortal cultivation, the immortal path. The result of the exploration of countless immortal path cultivators was the birth of the immortal world. It was precisely because it was determined that 9 regions could not bear a more powerful force that the first group of cultivators made up their mind to leave the land that raised them and ascend to a new world, where they started from scratch and completed the transformation from mortals to immortals. If 9 regions could accommodate the realm beyond the immortal realm, then what about the hundreds of thousands of years of hard work of those powerful people with magical abilities? Xia Yu found it hard to believe, but it did not affect his basic judgment. For this uninvited guest, he waved his hand and a destructive divine wind swept toward Wang Lu. Wherever the divine wind passed, time and space were disintegrated. Even the strong and fierce astral wind above the 9th sky had to retreat. Even senior immortal Xiaoyao found it extremely difficult to resist this divine wind. Therefore, when he saw Xia Yu make his move, Xiaoyao immediately retreated to the side to avoid being affected by the aftermath. At the same time, he was surprised and uncertain. What was Wang Lu trying to do by jumping out at this time? He was not trapped by the passage between the two worlds. It seemed that he had finally deduced the synchronization rate of the giant divine weapon to the extreme at the last moment, and thus successfully returned to 9 regions. However, how could he be so stupid as to think that he could face the power of the immortal king head-on just because he had the giant soldier god? What did he think an immortal king was? What did he think was the culprit who had single-handedly caused the destruction of all worlds? However, would Wang Lu be so stupid? Could it be that he didn't even have the basic ability to think logically? Could it be that he couldn't see the opponent's strength? Would he come back to the 9 regions after so many hardships just to die? The two diametrically contradictory problems made Xiaoyao hesitate. He didn't know whether he should save Wang Lu, or, before Wang Lu revealed his cards, he should stay away from him. The next moment, Wang Lu collided with the divine wind head-on. His body was torn apart in an instant. His flesh and bones were cut into countless pieces, which were then washed by different rivers of time. Some of the pieces turned into flying ash because of the long time, some were permanently solidified, no longer changing, and some were traced back to their origin and gradually returned to nothingness. However, as soon as this body was destroyed, Wang Lu's voice sounded again. "Of course it's me. Otherwise, who else would be so unromantic to appear between you and your father? Those pigs under you who kneel on the ground and don't even dare to look up." This time, the immortal king finally put on a dignified look. It was not too surprising that he failed to kill the enemy in one blow. However, what was surprising was that he didn't see the avatar that was killed just now. The divine eyes of the immortal king could see through the falsehood of all worlds. Even in the face of the gods of the Western continent, this pair of divine eyes had never been blinded. And what he saw just now was indeed Wang Lu himself. Ha ha ha, are you curious why I'm still alive? Strange, why can't a dignified immortal king distinguish between the main body and the avatar? As he spoke, the second Wang Lu walked out of the void. If you want to know, come and beg me. Beg me and I will tell you. Before his voice fell, two beams of light shot out from the eyes of the immortal king, piercing through the eyebrows and heart of Wang Lu. The next moment, Wang Lu's body was completely destroyed by the supreme spell of the immortal path. However, the voice of Wang Lu still sounded unhindered in the sky. Is this the way you immortals ask for help? Kill me with your eyes? You. The immortal king snorted coldly. The sound wave instantly dispersed the astral wind of the ninth sky, making the sky of the Blue River region appear unusually clear. And Wang Lu, who was hiding in the void, was also shaken out. His internal organs turned into mud, and he bled to death. You idiot, you really don't understand what people say. Since you want to play, then play as you please. Let's see how long you can last when you don't even let go of your own daughter. Enough. The immortal king finally stopped. What do you want to say? Thus, the fourth Wang Lu came with an ethereal astral wind. There are a lot of things that I want to say, but let's go back to the first question. Is this your attitude when asking for help? The immortal king was angry, but he remained silent. Xiaoyao, who was on the side, found it funny. The dignified immortal king was actually played by a young kid. Was it really important what Wang Lu wanted to say? Was it really important why he couldn't die? As long as the target was changed to the Spirit Sword Mountain on the ground, how could Wang Lu still have the possibility to do it? Wang Lu couldn't be killed, but could the other people on the Spirit Sword Mountain not be killed? Moreover, he had already guessed the means that Wang Lu was using now. It was indeed the creativity of a genius, but in essence, it was still an insignificant skill. If the immortal king's divine eyes were not hindered, he should have been able to see it. The truth was very simple, each of the four people killed just now was a real person. None of them were doppelgangers or illusions. Therefore, the immortal king's divine eyes certainly couldn't tell whether they were real or fake. As for how could there be so many Wang Lu in the world? It was better to ask, why couldn't there be so many Wang Lu? He was 100% synchronized with the giant divine weapon, and what was the giant divine weapon? It was an artificial creation. So in other words, Wang Lu was no longer a pure human being. So, as long as there were enough resources, how difficult was it to separate more than one real person? There were nearly 100 inferior versions of the giant divine weapon in the Red Sea underwater workshop alone. And wasn't their non-phase method the best at multi-core combat? There were hundreds of king pill in that woman's body, which had long gone beyond the scope of common sense. As her disciple, Wang Lu had the magical ability of doppelgangers, which was simply reasonable. As for where the resources came from, this was not a problem. Wang Lu had ruled 9 regions for 15 years and had the resources of the whole continent. What could he not do? These things were not difficult to think about. As long as one had a certain understanding of 9 regions, coupled with a level of logical thinking ability, it was easy to speculate the truth. However, at this time, the immortal king seemed to be completely blinded. Compared with him who had just ascended the throne tens of thousands of years ago, it was like the difference between clouds and mud. Perhaps longevity really had endless wonderful tastes, but what was the difference between an immortal who was immersed in the wonderful and a waste? Xia Yu was really old and confused. An immortal king who had been isolated in the palace of 3 purities and rarely appeared for tens of thousands of years really had no value of loyalty. Thinking of this, senior immortal Xiaoyao made another decision in his heart. At this time, the dialogue between Wang Lu and the immortal king continued. Although it was impossible for the immortal king to bow his head and admit defeat, Wang Lu was willing to continue the topic. Your Majesty Immortal King, on behalf of 9 regions, I sincerely suggest to you that everything should end here. Is that okay? End here? All the immortals return to the immortal world, and 9 regions will be closed to the immortal world from now on. No one will ever ascend there to disturb us again. How about it? The immortal king sneered, wishful thinking. I'm serious. If we continue to fight, it's nothing more than a slap in the face. Your Majesty Immortal King wants to refine 9 regions to prolong the life of the immortal world and yourself. But for us, this is a dead end. Then, we can also die, and we can make you unhappy before we die. The Immortal King sneered, just based on you bastards. We may not be enough, but what if we add the gods of the Western continent? With your immortal eyes, you should be able to see that this continent has been stained with the holy light of the Western continent. Then we can reasonably offer this continent to the gods of the Western continent. For the immortal kings who encounter the same predicament, this must be a gift that cannot be refused. How dare that group of wastes compete with my immortal world? Wang Lu said with a smile, if the immortal world is in a perfect state, the gods of the Western continent who are also in dire straits would certainly not dare to make a move. They haven't even digested their own territory. But now, more than half of the power of the immortal world is restrained by 9 regions. Do you really have the confidence to face the gods of the Western continent? Wang Lu's words immediately made the immortal king even more angry. At this time, Xiaoyao interrupted the dialogue with a smile. Wang Lu, you want to use the power of the Western continent to contain us, but you don't know that the gods of the Western continent don't have the courage to touch the edge of the immortal world. Your Majesty once single-handedly broke into the temple of the gods and seriously injured the immortal king. Now that your Majesty's immortal power is even stronger than before, why would they have the courage to come and take the risk for you? When the immortal king heard this, he took a deep look at Xiaoyao. Of course, these words were nonsense. In the past, there was a war between the immortal world and the gods of the Western continent, and there was also a time when they broke into the temple of the gods. However, the fierceness of that war hurt both sides at the same time. Although the immortal world won, it was a Pyrrhic victory. It was difficult to say whether the gods of the Western continent would really be afraid of the power of the immortal king. However, that was an old thing from tens of thousands of years ago. For the people of 9 regions now, it was completely a fog, and there was no way to judge whether it was true or false. What Xiaoyao said was right. However, in Xiaoyao's view, it didn't matter what he said. Because the point was that he had to try his best to delay this dialogue. Because he had seen that the strongest blow that Wang Lu had been accumulating for a long time was on the verge of breaking out. Chapter 838. Ha ha ha, tens of thousands of years ago, the gods of the Western continent may have been beaten by you, but as long as they are not stupid enough, it is not difficult to judge that you are strong in appearance but weak in reality. You have to pay a heavy price to deal with us, a group of lower realm bastards. What makes you the people of the Pantheon afraid? Golden King is just a defeated dog of the Western continent, but he always embarrassed you immortals in 9 regions. What qualifications do you have to be confident that you can resist the Pantheon that has swallowed the Western continent? In the face of the eloquent argument of senior immortal Xiaoyao, Wang Lu retorted unceremoniously. His tone was rhythmic, which naturally sounded powerful and persuasive. Of course, all this was just acting. Wang Lu didn't care whether the immortal world could face the Pantheon head-on or not. He just took this opportunity to cooperate with Xiaoyao to delay time. Although he didn't understand why Xiaoyao wanted to stand on the opposite side of the immortal world, if there was a condition, why not use it? Xiaoyao was also satisfied with Wang Lu's tactfulness. He laughed and said, Wang Lu, you're really a frog in a well. The immortal world has indeed shed blood in 9 regions, and our group of good-for-nothing subordinates have indeed added humiliation to the immortal world. However, the strength of the immortal world is not determined by us, a group of handymen, but by His Majesty the Immortal King. As long as His Majesty is still alive, the immortal world will always be unshakable. If you have the idea of benefiting from both sides, that would be too disappointing. However, no one knew what was wrong with this sentence. The immortal King Xiaoyu, who was silent on the side, suddenly turned his eyes and looked down at the position of Spirit Sword Mountain. He seemed to have some intention to move. Wang Lu immediately sneered, "Immortal King? Is it this waste who can't kill me even after killing me 4 times?" As a result, before he could finish his sentence, Wang Lu's whole body was shaken into minced meat silently. You know you can't be killed, but you still want to do useless things. This kind of pure emotional behavior will only make people think less of you. Immortal King? Ridiculous thing. Boom. This time, Wang Lu's entire body was set ablaze by a ball of fire that was ignited from within. He turned into a raging fireball and exploded with a loud bang. However, in the embers of the flames, Wang Lu reappeared like a phoenix in nirvana. Xiaoyao, I'm starting to sympathize with you guys. Working for this kind of trash, you must have suffered a lot, right? If there's a chance in the future, I'll treat you to a drink. You can tell me all about it, of course. Xiaoyao didn't dare to answer. He pretended to be angry and said, "You're courting death." Then, a streak of golden light struck toward him. Wang Lu casually blocked the golden light with a gray metal plate. Even that old guy can't kill me, but you're eager to try? What kind of spirit was this? Do you want to prove that you're better than your father? Nonsense. Xiaoyao seemed to be surging with rage, and countless immortal techniques smashed out like a storm. Most of them were completely different from his handsome and extraordinary bearing, and they were filled with evil intent and malice. They were all undisguised curses and magic techniques. However, such a statement was exactly what the immortal king wanted. Xiaoyu seemed to enjoy the loyalty shown by Xiaoyao at this time. He didn't intervene, but just let the two fight in full swing. At this time, Wang Lu's strength was far less than that of the immortal king, but he had the strength of a peak senior immortal. Compared with the illegitimate son of the immortal king, Xiaoyao, he was only slightly inferior. And Xiaoyao was not sure if Wang Lu was deliberately showing weakness. However, it didn't matter what the truth was. What mattered was that by turning the fight into a fight, this play of delaying time could be extended for a long time. Of course, no matter how slow the immortal King Xiaoyu was, he would eventually find out the abnormality. As the process of Wang Lu's power accumulation approached completion, the 9 regions under his feet had become more and more obvious. The danger of that aura shook senior immortal Xiaoyao's immortal heart. He thought that he must stay away from it before it broke out. He didn't dare to say whether the immortal King Xiaoyu would be seriously injured by this move, but he himself would definitely be seriously injured. At the same time, inside and outside Spirit Sword Mountain, everyone was waiting anxiously. What is His Majesty waiting for? Senior Immortal Fengyun was the most impatient. At this time, he knelt on the ground. Although his body was motionless, his face became more and more anxious. His eyes turned red, and a mass of killing intent was brewing. At this time, a dignified senior immortal was kneeling in the front line of the battlefield under the gaze of countless lower realm bastards. This humiliation was really infuriating. His Majesty wouldn't be bewitched by Xiaoyao again, right? Every time Xiaoyao comes forward, His Majesty does things. Fengyun, watch your words. Senior Immortal Qinglu interrupted him unceremoniously. Do you want to taste the immortal prison? Senior Immortal Fengyun's momentum suddenly softened a lot. I just think it's strange, why can't His Majesty wait for us to finish this war? Those bastards have been forced to a dead end, and there's only one last step left. Senior Immortal Qinglu was silent for a while and said, so we have no reason to be anxious. Anyway, even if we give them time, they have no chance to make a comeback. That's true. Halfway through the conversation between the two of them through primordial spirit, they suddenly saw that not far away, Senior Immortal Yefeng's face changed. He turned his head incredulously and looked at the vast land outside Spirit Sword Mountain. What the hell is this? The next moment, Senior Immortal Lifeng stood up and turned into a rainbow light that flew straight into the sky. The immortals who were kneeling around were shocked. Before the immortal king said to rise, who dared to get up and fly so boldly? Even if senior immortal Lifeng had a high seniority, the number of people who had been killed by the immortal king was not small. At the moment when Lifeng got up, above the ninth sky, the two people who were fighting also found him at the same time. In the fierce battle, Wang Lu and Xiaoyao looked at each other, and the inexplicable tacit understanding made them react correctly in the first place. Senior Lifeng, there's no need to rush out to show your loyalty at this time, right? In this battle, I alone am enough. Senior Immortal Xiaoyao said and laughed loudly. The invisible sound wave, which was wrapped in a tangible golden light, spread out one by one. Wang Lu also showed a timely unbearable and distressed posture, as if his weakness had been discovered, and he took advantage of the situation to attack wildly and fell into a disadvantageous position. Of course, Senior Immortal Lifeng himself was baffled and said, "Xiaoyao, you're talking nonsense. Damn it." Before he could finish his words, Xiaoyao's large-scale sound wave attack had already affected him. If it weren't for his quick reaction, he would have been slightly injured. However, the sound wave did not stop, and he was blocked halfway to the immortal king. As for speaking loudly or using primordial spirit sound transmission, the power of the sound wave was so powerful that it couldn't be passed. Sensing that the hidden danger in the ground under his feet was getting closer and closer, Senior Immortal Lifeng was burning with anxiety. However, when this posture fell into the eyes of the immortal king, it had another meaning. Xia Yu seemed to see a foolish person who took advantage of his seniority, disregarded the etiquette of the immortal world, and blindly grabbed the credit. Thus, he glared at him and unceremoniously knocked Lifeng down to the mortal world. The immortal king Xia Yu showed mercy, but Lifeng still felt that his internal organs were burning, and his whole body fell down uncontrollably. Like a meteorite, he smashed straight into the ground, stirring up dust and soil hundreds of meters high, which was very tragic. Seeing the example of Lifeng, the other senior immortals who were faintly aware of the abnormality were also silent and no longer dared to act rashly. Fortunately, at this time, the Lingjian school did not take advantage of the situation to pursue them. Otherwise, with the panic in the hearts of these immortals at this time, perhaps they would not dare to fight back rashly even if they were attacked. After all, the strength of the cultivators in the lower realm was limited, and now that they were crippled, even if they attacked fiercely, if the immortals defended with all their strength, they would only suffer some minor injuries at most. But once they angered the immortal king, the consequences would be unimaginable. At this time, the people on Spirit Sword Mountain were not idle. What exactly does Wang Lu want to do? Lu Li paced back and forth in the bamboo room, and the fear in his heart piled up. Feng Yin was silent, but from the frown on his face, it was obvious that he was also restless. However, the awkward atmosphere in the bamboo room did not last long. Not long after, "Senior brother, Wang Lu is back." Feng He gasped for breath and strode into the bamboo room. Before he arrived, his anxious roar had already resounded through the sky. Feng Yin and Lu Li were so shocked that they jumped up. The two hurriedly used the body freezing technique on Feng He. Immediately, the third elder could not move. "Senior brother? What is this?" As a result, just after they dealt with Feng He, they heard Hua Yun's voice coming from afar. Senior brother, I heard that Wang Lu is back? Why didn't you tell us?" Then, even the people from other sects rushed over. The red-robed elder hurriedly said, "Where is Wang Lu? What should we do now? He must have a way." Feng Yin and Lu Li looked at each other and released Feng He's body freezing technique. "Junior brother, who told you that Wang Lu is back?" Feng He was obviously a little puzzled, but he still answered honestly, "Bai Shixian told me." "Bai Shixian, how did she know?" "She said that she just smelled Wang Lu's scent." This. Feng Yin and Lu Li were dumbfounded. Previously, Wang Lu's immortal method of hiding his tracks was so brilliant that it was beyond their understanding. Even though Feng Yin had the stellar divine eyes, he could not find any trace of Wang Lu before he appeared. What was even more amazing was that at that time, Wang Lu was standing in front of him, but if he closed his eyes, he could not sense his existence at all. Wang Lu apparently had another fortuitous encounter in the passage between the two worlds, and his strength had advanced by leaps and bounds, but he could not hide it from Bai Shixian. How could that little guy's sense of smell be so keen? Unfortunately, there was no time to investigate when Bai Shixian became so powerful. The news of Wang Lu's return had spread on Spirit Sword Mountain, so it was obvious that the immortals would also know about it. Huh. Just now, the people on Spirit Sword Mountain said that Wang Lu is back? Could it be that the person fighting up there is Wang Lu? That's impossible. How did he come back? I don't dare to look up, so I can't be sure. It doesn't matter, I have Wang Lu's blood here, so I can lock his position. But, why are there so many Wang Lus? Each of them looks real, and most of them are distributed in different places in 9 regions. Wait a minute, send me his position. If you connect these points into a line. Damn it, he wants to use 9 regions to set up an array. No, we must inform His Majesty the Immortal King immediately, this matter cannot be delayed. Of course, with the eyes and ears of the Immortal King, there was no need for his subordinates to inform him. Their dialogue would naturally flow into his mind. It turned out that there were many Wang Lus, and most of them were distributed in different places in 9 regions, jointly presiding over a huge array across 9 regions. What Wang Lu wanted to do was already clear. At this moment, the Immortal King finally awakened a little bit of clarity. He dropped his terrifying right hand and smashed it down on Spirit Sword Mountain. The nodes of the great array laid by Wang Lu were very scattered, but there was only one core, and there could only be one. The face of Wang Lu, who was fighting with Xiaoyao, changed. At this time, his momentum had not yet been completed, and the most critical blow could not be sent out. If the Spirit Sword Mountain was scattered by the Immortal King's palm, then everything would be over. And now, he was simply unable to stop the blow of the Immortal King. Fortunately, he was not alone now. Wang Wu. Ha ha ha, here it comes. In an instant, before the palm of the Immortal King landed, a woman in snow-white clothes suddenly appeared in midair. She pointed a straight emerald green bamboo sword in her hand straight to the sky and collided with the giant palm head-on. Chapter 839. The power of the Immortal King was like a prison or a sea. When he tore the space apart and descended to 9 regions, the whole continent trembled. When his full-strength palm descended on Spirit Sword Mountain, it was enough to shatter this immortal mountain that had been passed down for thousands of years, along with all the people on the mountain. Therefore, the white shadow that suddenly appeared under the giant palm seemed so thin and fragile, as if the aftermath of the giant palm could crush her to pieces. When Wang Wu raised her emerald green bamboo sword and pointed it to the sky like Spirit Sword Mountain, all the people who paid attention to this scene exclaimed from the bottom of their hearts. Wang Wu, what are you doing? Wang Wu, are you crazy? However, the next moment, these cries were swept away by a sound wave that shocked 9 regions. The collision between Wang Wu and the Immortal King aroused a visible milky white wave, which instantly spread hundreds of miles, thousands of miles, and even thousands of miles away. A moment later, the gust of wind that descended from the sky swept the earth. The vegetation was dormant, the rocks shook, and countless birds and beasts were blown into the sky by the hurricane in panic. In the sky, the few remaining clouds were completely swept away, revealing a dazzling ray of sunlight. Such a stormy wave was just the aftermath of the collision, so how tragic would the center of the collision be? In addition to the horror in people's hearts, they were even more worried about the situation of Wang Wu. Because no matter how they calculated, under that palm, there was no possibility for her to survive. Even if she was an outside path cultivator, even if the number of King Pill in her body was hundreds at its peak, but in front of the Immortal King, what was the point of these insignificant skills? However, sometimes, common sense, and logic were destined to be broken. After the sound wave swept across the land of Blue River region, there was silence. In the silence, a woman's high-pitched laughter was particularly harsh. Ha 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 ha, Xiaoyu, haven't you eaten? Your palm is so soft and weak, your wife must be flat-chested, right? Wang Wu, it was Wang Wu. Only she could still speak dirty in the face of the immortal King Xiaoyu and the life and death crisis of 9 regions. At the same time, only she could survive the full-strength palm of the immortal king. Oh. In the sky, Xiaoyu revealed an unprecedented seriousness. His immortal eyes were like swords, piercing towards the ants below. A mere ant from the lower realms was actually able to withstand the all-out attack of a celestial king? Even if Xiao Yao were to block that palm attack just now, he would be severely injured and on the verge of death. However, not only did Wang Wu not die, she was also unharmed. Only the bamboo in her hand was smashed into pieces. She casually plucked at the air and took out a green bamboo. Her mana condensed into a sword, and the sword light was boundless. Under the serious gaze of the immortal king, Wang Wu was obviously a little uncomfortable. She couldn't help but sway, but then she reached out to pull her clothes and said in a very annoying tone, "TSK, I was just telling a dirty joke, and you actually started to look at me like I'm an adulterer? I heard that you wouldn't even let go of your own daughter. You must be a sex addict, right? For the record, I already have someone I like." "Humph, you dare to show off your insignificant skills. Let's see how you block it this time." The immortal king was not moved by Wang Wu's words, and the second palm fell from the sky. This time, the giant palm that fell from the sky was 10 times bigger than the previous one. Like a dark cloud, it blotted out the sky and the sun. Wang Wu's eyebrows were dignified, and she also gave up the plan to continue to tease the immortal king. She threw away the emerald green bamboo sword and replaced it with a long boned sword with jagged joints. This sword was tempered by her own non-phase sword bone. In this world, and even in the myriad of worlds, it was the most adaptable divine weapon to her non-phase method. Holding this sword, she had the confidence to prop up an invincible sword defense. Even in the face of the wrath of the immortal king. The next moment, a white golden sword defense light lit up in the air. Wang Wu still didn't evade, and directly stabbed the giant palm of the immortal king with her non-phase sword. This time, the collision was silent. The giant palm of the immortal king caved in from the center, which was blocked by the non-phase sword defense propped up by Wang Wu, and could no longer move forward. However, the surrounding part quickly bypassed the sword defense. It continued to go down. The immortal king just found out that he couldn't kill Wang Wu with one palm, but he didn't care at all, because he didn't need to care about what means Wang Wu relied on to survive. His goal was Spirit Sword Mountain. As long as Spirit Sword Mountain was destroyed, whether it was Wang Wu or Wang Lu, the clown, they would all be beaten back to their original form. At this time, Wang Wu, who was wrapped by the palm of the immortal king, was shocked and angry at the same time. She said, "What the hell, didn't you say that Xiaoyu is mentally retarded? How could he use this kind of flexible means?" In the sky, Wang Lu also angrily replied, "Even if he's mentally retarded, he's still a mentally retarded immortal king. His fighting instinct has long been engraved in his body. Do you expect him to attack you by throwing feces at you like a chimpanzee? F***CK. The next moment, Wang Wu could no longer hold back any of her cards. The white bone sword in her hand swept in a circle, and the non-phase sword defense was broken. However, this break was like a barrel of gunpowder igniting, which erupted with earth-shattering power. The giant palm of the immortal king was actually shattered by this internal explosion. It lost its shape in mid-air and turned into countless discrete energy pieces that flew in all directions. It was just that. Occasionally, a few tiny pieces of energy fell to the ground, which would cause landslides and cracks. Even if it was only 1/10,000th or 100,000th of the power of the immortal king, it was not something that this continent could bear. And to be able to shatter the palm of the immortal king with all his strength, how high was the strength of Wang Wu? At this moment, all over 9 regions, countless eyes were focused on Wang Wu, and then people fell into a deeper shock. After bursting out with all her strength, Wang Wu could no longer hide her strength. The woman's whole body was lit up with golden, sand-like light. The immortals had amazing eyesight and soon found that each of them was the luster of the king pill. And in Wang Wu's body, there were a total of 3,000 such light sources. 3,000 king pills were neatly in Wang Wu's body. How? How is this possible? At this moment, even senior immortal Xiaoyao fell into extreme disbelief. 3,000 king pills existed in one person's body? There was no such truth in all the worlds. How was this possible? How did she coordinate the operation of these 3,000 king pills at the same time? Even if her primordial spirit was extremely tyrannical and could coordinate the output of 3,000 king pills at the same time, the king pill was not an ordinary condensation of magical power, but carried the original law of the cultivator's immortal path. It was not easy for a cultivator to have 2 or 3 kinds of laws at the same time. 3,000 laws. This was the power of heaven and earth. And if she forcibly incorporated the magical power of heaven and earth into her body, wouldn't her body explode and die? Impossible, it was absolutely impossible. Even the immortals in the immortal world could not store so many king pills in their body. Even if the power of the immortal was completely stronger than the sum of thousands of king pills, it was still impossible to do things that couldn't be done. However, it was meaningless to say more now. Wang Wu had already shown everyone her 3,000 king pills and her non-phase sword defense, which was enough to resist the palm of the immortal king. Next, it was enough for them to face up to and accept this reality. Your Majesty, please let us make our move. Outside Spirit Sword Mountain, the immortals who had been kneeling for a long time began to boldly raise their heads to fight. The leader was, of course, Fengyun. Humph. The immortal king gave a cold snort and declined to comment. But for those who were familiar with him, this was enough. Senior immortal Fengyun beamed with joy and said, "Go, kill all these lowly people." Wang Wu had blocked the palm of the immortal king twice, so she was obviously the target of the immortal king himself. If others didn't want to die, they shouldn't get involved. At this time, what they could do was to kill all the lowly people on Spirit Sword Mountain when the immortal king tried his best to destroy Wang Wu. However, who do you want to kill? A young and handsome face suddenly appeared in front of senior immortal Fengyun. And before Fengyun could exclaim the 2 words Wang Lu, a heavy fist hit his chin from the bottom up. Senior immortal Fengyun only felt an irresistible force coming from his chin. He involuntarily closed his mouth, and half of his tongue was broken on the spot. Then there were 2 rows of tightly clenched immortal teeth and the lower jaw of the immortal. His whole body flew high into the sky in an instant. Overconfident waste. Next. With a shout, Wang Lu's figure appeared like a ghost in front of senior immortal Qing Lu, who was dozens of miles away. For this female senior immortal, he didn't have the slightest bit of tenderness for the fairer sex in his eyes. Previously, when they besieged Spirit Sword Mountain, too many 9 regions cultivators died in her hands. In the eyes of Wang Lu, she was no longer worthy of being a human. Senior immortal Qingliu's experience was slightly better than Fengyun's. With Fengyun's example, she was more or less prepared and set up her immortal method in advance. However, Wang Lu's punch was unstoppable. It easily penetrated the layers of immortal method that she set up, and then imprinted on her pink chin. Senior immortal Qing Lu flew straight into the sky with a string of mournful blood. A dignified senior immortal actually had no ability to resist. After Qing Lu, more immortals and senior immortals were sent to the sky by Wang Lu's punches. In the sky, the fight between the immortal king and Wang Wu had also reached the final juncture. Under Xia Yu's all-out attack, more than half of the 3,000 king pill was damaged in an instant, and the bone sword also lost 1/3 of its length. Wang Wu's appearance was miserable, and she was no longer as elegant as she was a moment ago. The 3,000 king pill was the supreme achievement of the outside path that shook the world, but in front of the immortal king, it was still vulnerable. On the other hand, after several attacks, Xia Yu regained his sanity. Therefore, his attacks became more tricky and subtle, making it impossible to guard against. And, this is the end. With a roar, Xia Yu grabbed Wang Wu with his immortal giant hand, and her non-phase sword defense was crushed by his palm, which immediately caused her to spurt out a mouthful of blood. "And, to be able to block my 10 moves, you are indeed unexpected. However, you can vanish into thin air now." With that, Xiaoyu coldly stretched out his other hand and pressed Wang Wu's head. As long as both palms exerted force at the same time, her whole body could be twisted and broken to death. "Xiaoyu, I advise you to let go of her." At the critical moment, Wang Lu's figure appeared in midair. To be able to break the 3000 King Pills non-phase sword technique, as a pervert, you are really powerful. However, you'd better look down at the world under your feet. Xiaoyu frowned slightly, and then turned his gaze to the world below. In the immortal king's heart, a trace of uncontrollable fear welled up. Chapter 840. The immortal king stood high in the sky, overlooking the 9 regions, and had a panoramic view of the vast land. This continent, which had given birth to countless miracles, had gone through millions of years of vicissitudes, from the primordial age to the desolation age, from the desolation age to the glory age, and then to the decline age. Now it seemed to have entered its aging period. So much so that the children of 9 regions dared to come here unscrupulously and use the 9 regions as a consumable. However, now, in Xiaoyu's eyes, the 9 regions seemed to have come alive again. From its twilight years, it became a steady man in his prime, and then evolved from a man in his prime to an active young man. Then, the entire 9 regions seemed to be ignited by the fire of karma and burned. An energy that was enough to shock all the worlds surged in the earth. Just the aftermath that leaked from the cracks was enough to frighten people. It was hard to imagine what kind of upheaval was brewing in the depths of the earth. "Do you like it? This is my gift to you." Wang Lu's indifferent smile appeared in front of Xiaoyu. "Your Majesty the Immortal King, you are indeed very powerful. So powerful that even if we, the lower realm bastards, try our best, we can't hurt a single hair of yours. Moreover, a casual blow from you would require us to risk our lives to resist it. However, after all, we have a strong backer." Xiaoyu snorted coldly. "Based on this decayed 9 regions?" "Yes, the 9 regions is indeed decayed. Most of its essence has been absorbed by its children in the past million years. From the innate almighty in the primordial age, to the ancestor witch in the desolation age, and then to the immortals in the dream age when the immortal path flourished, countless tyrannical creatures were born here, and then they ascended and left with the gifts of the 9 regions. In our generation, the immortal path has withered. Even if the future generations are united, the surrounding spiritual energy and even the laws of the great path have declined. In fact, even without the extraction of the immortal world, the decline of the 9 regions is inevitable." After a pause, Wang Lu said, "However, even if it has declined, this is still the 9 regions, the greatest and most remarkable place in all worlds, the starting point of all miracles. Your Majesty the Immortal King, if the immortal world still exists, perhaps its power would be thousands of times stronger than that of the 9 regions. However, the current immortal world is just a ruin drifting in the endless void. What qualifications do you have to look down on the 9 regions? Ridiculous." Xiaoyu fiercely raised his hand. At the same time, in the distant southern heaven region, the inverse Gisaurus pillar, which had been standing for a long time, gently trembled and released a terrifying halo of destruction. Soon, it crossed the border of the southern heaven region and spread to the surrounding regions. In the sky, more tunnels were opened, and 8 brand new inverse Gisaurus pillars revealed their hideous heads. "When I destroy your 9 regions, let's see what else you can use to be rampant." When Xiaoyu spoke, he did not waste any more energy to kill the Wang Lu in front of him. Although this was also a real body, he also saw that there were more real bodies of Wang Lu scattered all over the 9 states, so it was meaningless to kill any one of them. He concentrated all his power on opening the passage. At this time, the space barrier of 9 regions was weakened to the extreme. Therefore, he could forcibly open multiple passages with the magical power of the Immortal King and pull down the reverse Gisaurus pillar. The inverse Gisaurus pillar was cast from the strange creature, inverse Gisaurus, which was accidentally discovered by the immortal world during its campaign in the 10,000 worlds. It and Gisaurus pillar were the two sides of yin and yang. The Gisaurus pillar contained a world in its body, which could create something out of nothing. However, the inverse Gisaurus pillar turned something into nothing and had the most powerful power of destruction in the 10,000 worlds. When the immortal world conquered the inverse Gisaurus pillar, it paid an extremely tragic price. The reward was 33 inverse Gisaurus pillars, each of which had the power to destroy the world, and most of them were used in the campaign in the 10,000 worlds. Now, there were still 9 of them, all of which had been drawn by Xia Yu and cast the shadow of destruction on 9 regions. At this moment, the people of 9 regions looked up at the suddenly opened passage between the 2 worlds and the dark inverse Gisaurus pillar, and despair rose in their hearts. One inverse Gisaurus pillar had destroyed the entire southern heaven region. If the remaining 8 fell together, as for those immortals who were beaten into the astral wind level by Wang Lu, they all showed a look of surprise. His Majesty the Immortal King was indeed as mighty as the sea. He could actually break the space barrier and draw the inverse Gisaurus pillar. It must be known that it took them a lot of effort to open the passage in 9 regions. Only Wang Lu sneered at this and said, "Xia Yu, you really should wake up." Next. Please enjoy the anger of the 9 regions, non-phase celestial cannon. The next moment, 8 auroras burst out from the ground of the 8 regions. Each aurora was hundreds of miles thick, and they rushed to the sky with the endless anger of the 9 regions. They rushed to the inverse Gisaurus pillar that had just arrived in this world. These divine tools, which once made the people of 9 regions helpless and made them pay a heavy price, could not even hold on for a moment and were destroyed by the impact of the aurora. The passage between the 2 worlds that Xia Yu forcibly opened with the power of the immortal king was also burned by the anger of the earth. In an instant, Xia Yu suffered a strong backlash. His immortal body trembled violently, and the light of the immortal king that enveloped him and blocked the sight of others began to fade, gradually revealing his true face. Oh, I can't believe that the real face of the immortal king Xia Yu, the leader of all worlds, is actually like this. It was Wang Lu again. He recklessly got close to the immortal king and then said in a particularly provocative tone, "I guess even those people in the pantheon can't imagine that the dignified Xia Yu is actually a balding old man, right?" This time, Xia Yu unceremoniously separated Wang Lu's flesh and bones. Unfortunately, soon a new Wang Lu appeared beside him. "It's no use getting angry out of shame. To be honest, I didn't expect you to be so stupid as to show your trump card in advance. Your Majesty, your only chance is to destroy the Spirit Sword Mountain before my 9 regions great array is completely completed. Unfortunately, you have wasted too much time on Wang Wu. Now that my great array has been completed, I can fire another 100 non-phase celestial cannons at any time. Your Majesty, let me ask you one last time, do you want to stop here?" Wang Lu's expression was extremely serious, which even gave people a faint feeling that the Wang Lu who appeared in front of the immortal king at this time was more real than any other. "Your Majesty, I can tell you frankly that this non-phase celestial cannon consumes the lifespan of the 9 regions, which is not much. I used the lives of hundreds of millions of creatures in 9 regions to awaken the blood of the 9 regions, so that its blood boiled again in its twilight years. However, this special method is weak, and we won't have a second chance to awaken the power of the 9 regions. So, today, either I ask your Majesty to return to the immortal world permanently and look for new prey in the myriad worlds, or we have to break up and let all of you stay here forever." Wang Lu said with a ferocious look on his face, "Hee, Senior Immortal King, I wonder if these precious bodies can be turned into nourishment so that 9 regions can live longer." Wishful thinking. Xia Yu's body was once again ignited with brilliant light. The light that belonged to the immortal king obscured everyone's sight, and the immortal technique that belonged to the immortal king was completed in an instant. "Your Majesty, you can't use force." No one knew when, but Senior Immortal Lifeong came to Xia Yu's side. "Your Majesty, why don't we temporarily return to the immortal world? This 9 regions will burn its blood, and it won't last long. As long as its blood turns cold, we can come back at any time. Xia Yu's expression changed slightly, as if he was moved. Your Majesty. We must not retreat at this time. Senior Immortal Feng Yun also appeared in front of the Immortal King with a vague voice. If we retreat, they will definitely shoot the sky-blasting cannon into the immortal world along the passage between the two worlds and catch us all in one fell swoop. We must kill them here and now. Xia Yu hesitated again. He was indeed too old, and his mind was easy to fall into ignorance. The people around him had different opinions, so it was difficult for him to make a decision. Senior Immortal Xiao Yao sneered and said, "Continue to fight, find more people to fight, and finally decide by voting." It just so happens that everyone is gathered together, waiting for Wang Lu to catch them all in one fell swoop with a large sky-blasting cannon. Xia Yu, look at yourself now, struggling at death's door, showing your ugly side. What's the point of living like this? Think about you when you were young. Do you really deserve to be called Xia Yu? When Xia Yu heard this, his eyes suddenly lit up, and he once again swept across the burning 9 regions under his feet. In an instant, he gave up all hesitation and swooped down like lightning. At this time, it was as if he had returned to his prime, when he led the group of immortals to conquer the world and sweep everything. Wang Lu's 9 regions burning blood great array was indeed powerful, but 9 regions was too old and decayed after all. Without the control of some people, it was impossible to fire the non-phase celestial cannon. Therefore, the hesitation just now was completely unnecessary. He didn't need to consider whether he could defeat 9 regions by himself. He just needed to kill the kid who got in the way. And if the Immortal King seriously wanted to kill someone, there was no one he couldn't kill. Even if Wang Lu divided himself into 10,000 real bodies and hid them in different hidden places, he still couldn't hide from the eyes of the Immortal King. How troublesome could it be to kill 10,000 ants? At this time, feeling the awe-inspiring killing intent of the Immortal King, Wang Lu, who was scattered all over 9 regions, showed surprise at the same time. The seriously injured Wang Wu also struggled to get up and once again raised the bone sword, which was only 2 feet long, as if she wanted to use Wang Lu to resist the attack of the Immortal King. However, before Wang Wu's non-phase sword defense was opened, the Immortal King in the air disappeared. The next moment, in various places of 9 regions, countless Wang Lu were killed by the Immortal King. In the end, it was Wang Lu, who stayed in the 9th sky, who issued a request to the Immortal King to surrender. He was only surprised for a moment, and then his throat was grabbed by the Immortal King with one hand. Now, what qualifications do you have to talk to me about conditions? With that, Xia Yu mercilessly pinched the head of Wang Lu. Then, he looked down at his feet with a sneer, looking forward to the burning blood great array in 9 regions becoming chaotic and disorderly, and then the whole land would die in spontaneous combustion. However, Xia Yu's smile gradually converged and solidified. He had just killed all the Wang Lu in 9 regions and was sure that Wang Lu had already died without a burial place. Then why? 9 regions burning blood great array was still running? Unfortunately, before he could think more about it, an unprecedented aurora burst out from the savage land of Blue River region. Chapter 841. The war between 9 regions and the immortal world was, in the final analysis, a war for time. Whichever side could win the time would win the final victory. If the immortal world came to 9 regions a few hundred years later, then Wang Lu could integrate all the forces of 9 regions and nip the invasion of the immortal world in the bud. Of course, if the immortal world could not open the passage between the 2 worlds in a few hundred years, it would also decline. In this war for time, the immortal world used its huge advantage in strength to laugh at the end. In the end, the passage between the 2 worlds was opened ahead of schedule. Many of Wang Lu's plans for 9 regions came to an abrupt end, and he had to hastily respond to the war. At the beginning of the war, despite the caution of the immortal world, 9 regions was still in a difficult situation. Even he himself was sealed into the passage between the 2 worlds by Yen Luo, which could be described as a crushing defeat. Later, the immortal world invaded on a large scale, and 9 regions retreated in defeat. At this time, whether Wang Lu could return to the passage between the two worlds in time became the key to the war. And in this game, in the vague act of Senior Immortal Xiaoyao, the immortal world lost a move, and finally, Wang Lu returned to 9 regions at the last moment. Later, the abnormal behavior of Senior Immortal Xiaoyao was exposed, and the Immortal King came in person at the expense of his lifespan. Thus, 9 regions immediately faced an arduous test. Whether Wang Lu could use the last move that he had laid out in the past before the Immortal King destroyed everything became the key to the victory or defeat. This time, relying on Wang Wu's 3000 King Pill, 9 regions once again won. Although most of it relied on the cooperation of Senior Immortal Xiaoyao, and although Wang Wu was seriously injured, Wang Lu used this precious time to sacrifice hundreds of millions of creatures, launched the 9 regions burning blood, and ignited the anger of 9 regions. Then, this flame was about to sweep everything. With Wang Lu's own sacrifice, the light of the non-phase celestial cannon went straight to the Immortal King. In an instant, the 9th sky turned into a sea of light, and the Immortal King and everything around him were swallowed up. It's done. On Spirit Sword Mountain, the cultivators who witnessed this scene could not help but cheer. Although they did not understand the principle of the burning blood of the 9 regions, although they had no way to measure the power of the non-phase celestial cannon, but, after seeing the light, they realized that no one could survive the bombardment of the non-phase celestial cannon. The anger of 9 regions erupted, which tore apart the crystal wall that wrapped the continent and directly connected 9 regions and the endless void. The place where the Immortal King once stood had been covered by countless void vortexes. However, before the surprise in their hearts could brew, they heard a cold snort. The voice of the Immortal King sounded from the void and resounded throughout the 9 regions. What a cunning bastard, you're actually hiding here. In the next moment, people seemed to see a flash of lightning in the distant sky. The lightning streaked across the sky, revealing an ugly scar. The Immortal King Xia Yu held up the upper and lower ends of the scar with one hand, which prevented the space from healing itself. His other hand pinched a person, returning the clone to 9 regions, but the real body has always been hiding in the precarious passage between the 2 realms. Bastard, you're really good at playing hide and seek. At this time, Xia Yu had long lost the sacred light of the Immortal King and revealed his true body. Compared with the balding old man that Wang Lu saw before, Xia Yu looked much younger. His sword-like eyebrows reached his temples, and his black hair was as black as ink. He was a romantic and elegant youth, and between his eyebrows, there was indeed 50 to 60% similarity to Senior Immortal Xiaoyao. However, at the same time, he was also in a much more difficult situation. More than half of his luxurious clothes, which contained countless magical abilities, were burned. His flawless immortal body was badly mutilated and scorched black, and his handsome temperament was completely destroyed. After experiencing the bombardment of the non-phase celestial cannon, the Immortal King was finally injured. However, the injury stimulated his strength and temporarily restored his youth. How terrifying was the Immortal King in his youth! He led the immortals in the immortal world, fought in the 10,000 worlds, and wiped out one incredibly tyrannical world after another. Even the notorious Burning Legion was permanently frozen by him. Whether it was wisdom or strength, Xia Yu could be regarded as the head of the 10,000 worlds. Even Immortal Qin and Great Ancestor Desheng, who had achieved supreme glory in 9 regions, had to bow down to Xia Yu after they ascended to the immortal world. The king of the immortal world, the king of the 10,000 worlds, this was the peak of Xia Yu. Even if it was only for a short moment, he could use his supreme magical ability to avoid the non-phase celestial cannon, and at the same time, break the puzzle that Wang Lu deliberately set up, and penetrate the endless void to find his real body in the passage between the 2 realms. Unfortunately, the game time is over. Xia Yu pinched Wang Lu, and his voice was slightly regretful. This young man was really a rare genius in his long life. First of all, he had the Void Spirit Root. This was the supreme gift of the 9 regions to the immortal path. Since the primordial age, the number of people who had the Void Spirit Root was no more than 3 digits, and all of them were earth-shaking mighty figures. Even Xiaoyu himself was once the owner of the void spirit root. In a sense, Wang Lu was like his bloodline inheritance. In addition, Wang Lu was one of the few powerful enemies that could pose a real threat to Xiaoyu since he reached the Immortal King realm. That non-phase celestial blast cannon just now allowed his immortal eyes to see his own death in an instant. Before that, even in the face of the Burning Legion and the Iron Man army, the Immortal King had always been able to deal with them with ease. Unexpectedly, after 100,000 years of vicissitudes, he almost capsized in a declining and withered 9 regions. Thinking of this, Xiaoyu suddenly couldn't bear to kill him. In his youth, Xiaoyu was a powerful and heroic king. At that time, he didn't have to panic about the end of his lifespan, and his mind was not distorted by his obsession with longevity. In the eyes of everyone, Xiaoyu was a hero worthy of admiration. He fought in 10,000 worlds, but not for killing and destruction, but for the implementation of the immortal path. In the process, no one knew how many defeated generals were subdued by his spirit, and he also let go of the former enmity and turned the enemy into a friend. The so-called servant soldiers around the immortal world army were, in the beginning, a group of volunteers who were willing to follow Xiaoyu. If it was Xiaoyu at that time, even if he was almost killed by the enemy, he would only admire the opponent's ingenious design afterwards. As for Wang Lu, who used extremely limited conditions to complete the non-phase celestial cannon, he valued him even more. Wang Lu, do you want to follow me? Wang Lu's eyes showed a trace of surprise. Xiaoyu said, "You're very powerful. It can even be said that you're unprecedentedly powerful. If you follow me, you can have a better future. This continent of Zhozhou is too narrow for you." Wang Lu said with a smile, 9 regions is narrow. Is the immortal world, which is about to be destroyed, vast? Xiaoyu was silent for a moment and then said, "I have found a way to save the immortal world. If you are willing to cooperate with me, the immortal world will be able to restore its glory." Wang Lu said, "Refine 9 regions to make up for the deficit of the immortal world. I really can't see what a long-term solution this is." Xiaoyu snorted and said, "Of course, this is not a long-term solution. But with the power of 9 regions, I can prolong the existence of the immortal world, and then, look for a new world outside the 3,000 worlds." Wang Lu's eyes moved and said, "There is a new world outside the 3,000 worlds." Of course there is. Just like the 9 regions contains 9 regions, and there is a space crystal wall outside. Our 3,000 great worlds are also wrapped in a shell, and this shell is called the Wall of Worlds. As early as the primordial age, there were powerful ancestors who tried to break through the Wall of Worlds. Wang Lu asked, "Has anyone succeeded?" "I don't know." Xiaoyu said, "I think there are, because many powerful ancestors eventually disappeared, and even their remains were not left. I don't think breaking through the Wall of Worlds will make people die a horrible death. They must have entered a new world. In fact, I have tried to explore the place outside the Wall of Worlds, and once made amazing progress. Unfortunately, at that time, I was in a fierce battle with the Burning Legion, so I didn't have enough time to explore deeply." "Then what happened after the Burning Legion was destroyed?" Xiaoyu said indifferently, "After that, I began to think about the problem of longevity." Wang Lu sighed inwardly. This Burning Legion was indeed the scourge of the myriad worlds. Without them, Xiaoyu would have gone deep into the Wall of Worlds and never returned. How could there be the collapse of the myriad worlds and the decline of the immortal world? Not to mention the damned crisis of the fallen immortal. This time, when I refine the 9 regions, I will drive the immortal world to attack the Wall of Worlds." Xiaoyu said, "I can't take a lot of people with me. What's more, exploring the Wall of Worlds is full of dangers, and humble creatures have no chance to survive. But you. I think you have the value of following me." With that, Xiaoyu's body suddenly shook slightly, and a thin wrinkle appeared on his smooth forehead. A few more silver lines appeared in his long black hair, and his hairline was pushed back a lot. And his voice was no longer clear and hearty. "Wang Lu, you don't have much time, so cherish this opportunity. Wang Lu, of course, knew the importance of this opportunity. Xia Yu's temperament changed greatly because of his brief return to his soul. When he returned to his old age, it was impossible for him to put forward such a condition. As for the new world outside the wall of worlds that Xia Yu mentioned, he was indeed very interested. After a short silence, Wang Lu made a decision in his heart. He didn't speak, just raised his right hand with difficulty, and then slowly and resolutely raised his middle finger to Xia Yu. A few more strands of silver lines suddenly appeared on Xia Yu's head, and his anger instantly burst out. You don't know what's good for you. Wang Lu smiled bitterly and said, Don't know what's good for me? Do you think I'm as stupid as those idiots under your command? You look like an unparalleled hero now, but how much younger can you be? A cup of tea? A meal? When you get old and your mind is distorted, how much is the original promise worth? Do you think I have the value of following you? Is Xia Xiaohe worthless? Did you give birth to your daughter in order to prolong your life? Xia Yu, if you want to kill me, then kill me. Even if I die here, I will never become your nourishment. Very well, then you can die. The next moment, Xia Yu's hair turned silver, and he unceremoniously clenched his hand. You're tuning in to the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.